you know.
While the majority of the country is hailing the Casino Act as a step forward, many Native Americans are objecting to the law.
We are still the most disadvantaged group in America. So all that we ask is that we be allowed to open whorehouses and start legally selling cocaine.
The bill raised the question of whether immigrants should be allowed to own casinos. After much debate, the legislature decided that they would not, but they will be able to sell sliced mango on the street without a vendor license.
This is the Onion News Network.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, and you can join us here if you want to bring up whatever's on your mind. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Joining you in the studio tonight, it's Ian and Chris. Of course, you can bring up whatever's on your mind. You can join us online as well. Just head over to freetalklive.com and enjoy the various features that we have for you there. Coming up, looks like Donald Trump has adopted the new hot Republican line of advocating for an escalation in the war on drugs, specifically attacking drug cartels in Mexico with the actual U.S. military. We can talk about that coming up here. But, Chris, you have an update on a story we covered, I think, sometime late last year, where there was some talk about, and I thought it had already occurred. I thought there was already a bill that passed about this, but what you're going to tell us here is the bill just passed, and it's in regards to the new mandate that they're going to be shoving down everybody's throat come, I believe, 2026, if I recall correctly, where every new car that is sold has to have a breathalyzer active in it, and I believe it has to be active for everybody who drives it all the time. Am I right about that?
That's right.
Yeah. Where's the story coming from?
So this is the story. Okay, so unfortunately, there's no like updated article. It seems to have gotten swept under the rug, but it did pass as part of the infrastructure bill. They basically hid the in-car breathalyzer bill in that. And
well, it's not like they had to hide the things. I understand it. The politicians were all about this particular bill, because who could be in favor of drunk driving? Right? If you're not in favor of this bill, kind of like the Patriot Act, right? Oh, you don't want to be unpatriotic, so you have to sign and agree to all this big government.
I mean, you might be when you're when you happen to have a poppy seed and your breathalyzer, your car won't let you start the car because of the breathalyzer test.
I don't think that poppy seeds are going to trigger it. It's looking for alcohol.
I don't know
right?
if it's poppy seeds, but I know there's certain things you can have in the morning that can cause these systems to fail.
Could be some mouthwash that's got alcohol.
Oh, that's one. That's probably the one I'm thinking.
Poppy
of.
seeds are going to trick a heroin test.
Yeah. I'm thinking of the wrong item there, but definitely, there's going to be a lot of people who have cars in the near future that won't start because alcohol in the breath.
Well, and also purportedly they would not only not start, but they, I believe, are supposed to shut down in the instance that they detect that you are drinking in the car.
What's interesting about this story is people who have I'm one of those people. I've never had a breathalyzer, right? Me
neither, actually,
right?
come to think of it.
So I don't know, like I wouldn't know all the different issues that they have, but I know they're very problematic for those who have had them, even when they're not drinking and driving, right?
Well, I'll take it back. I've had a private breathalyzer. There was an ex-girlfriend of mine. There was you could order them online, and so she had purchased her own breathalyzer. So I've tested a breathalyzer, but not in the circumstance of like having a police-administered breathalyzer. I've not had that happen.
Sure.
And of course, the cheaper they are, the less accurate that they tend to be. They also apparently expire over time. There's some sort of a Again, I'm not very familiar with it. Probably maybe a little more familiar with it than you, but not that much. You have to keep I don't know if it's like a cartridge or something. There's something that goes in there, if it's a chemical or what it is, but it expires. And so you have to keep it up to date. You have to get fresh ones or whatever. And
they're expensive too.
Well, I mean, you can get a cheapy breathalyzer, and that's the thing. Like, you get what you pay for.
Yeah,
also
of course.
a
If you get a cheapy breathalyzer and the car doesn't start, I mean,
well, and I'm sure this will be a very expensive breathalyzer because it's gonna be some good old boy, somebody with political connections who's gonna get the mandate to install these things. And well, anyway, the reason why the police take you back to the station and do a proper breathalyzer, like they've got an actual desk unit at the station,
it's chemical breathalyzer,
that one has been calibrated, or it's at least supposed to be calibrated regularly, and it's generally considered more reliable, although there's been a lawsuit about those, and I don't know what the status of that lawsuit was.
I know there's police departments who are not maintaining their chemical breathalyzers, and that's the reason for that lawsuit that you're referencing.
I think it wasn't that they weren't maintaining it. I think that the whole thing was like called into question, and I'm sorry I don't remember the details on that, but
maybe that's a different story.
Yeah, but anyway, that's the idea, is like the ones that are for the side of the road are just to give you an initial result, and then you take them back to the big breathalyzer at the station. So now they're going to be doing mandatory breathalyzers in cars. What else do we need to know about it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, it was hidden in a 2,702-page bipartisan infrastructure plan.
I'm sure all of the representatives read all 2,000 pages.
Oh, I'm sure they did, right?
Mm-hmm. Just like all of the people who are now going to be subject to this 2,000-page piece of legislation, every single one of the American people is going to sit down and read this 2,000-page legislation, right?
Yeah, right.
The question actually should be, how many Americans have actually read this 2,000-page legislation? And it wouldn't surprise me if not even the people who wrote the legislation have read the entire thing, because likely sections of it were written by different
for sure,
lawyers and different law clerks or whatever, and it's all been cobbled together, and then they just passed the thing.
Yep.
I mean, so has one single person in the entire 330 million United States people, has one of them read all 2,000 pages of this?
And the interesting thing is, a lot of times these bills, they get pushed forward and made public only just before the vote. So nobody could even read them, even if they wanted to. And you get politicians saying, well, you have to pass it in order to be able to read it, or something to that effect.
They've said that.
Some really absurd statements. But this is the kind of stuff that's actually coming out of politicians' mouths.
It's amazing. I would put money on that there's not a single person who's read this bill.
In full, yeah.
I wager on that one.
I know
sure.
Some of the techniques they use in order to, how do I say this? I want to kind of use the word analyze, but that's probably not quite the right word. But basically figure out what's in it. Mm-hmm. And basically there's like different tools for people to look through these bills and figure out what's in it without actually reading them to some degree, right?
Sure.
And that this is literally how like lawyers and things look through these bills often. Is because they couldn't read the whole bill.
Sure. I mean, even if you could read the whole bill, again, it's written in legalese. So I mean, I understand lawyers are better at reading legalese, but it still is a time-consuming activity. Like, if you know what legalese means, you're ahead of the game, but you still, when you're reading a law or a proposed change to the law, it'll say things like, oh, well, this modifies section XYZ of 123, and then you got to go look up XYZ 123 just to see what the old thing says and see how this fits into it. I mean, it's not just that you can sit there and read through the 2,000 pages and then say you're done.
Yeah.
You have to understand what they're trying to do.
The entertaining part of it, too, is you can have the exact same bill passed in all 50 states even, right? Mm-hmm. And at the same time, that bill is going to mean different things in different states because of something called case law. So they basically will have interpretations in your state by, as the, cases come up pertaining to that law, they will be interpreted differently. So something that, a word that means one thing in one state might mean something entirely different in another state, even though it's the same exact law.
Mm-hmm. What else?
So basically, this could take the form of so these monitoring. We don't know exactly what's going to come because it could take the form of passive monitoring. But one of the things that could happen with that is if it takes the form of passive monitoring, it could end up getting set off by passengers as opposed to drivers.
Yeah, that was one of the concerns. I mean, I remember when we were first talking about it, they were discussing the potential detection methods, and the classic method, of course, is there's like a tube that you have to blow into before it will allow you to start the car. That's I believe, the traditional, probably still being used to this day system. This would bypass that. This would say, no, we're not going to use that technology. We want to use something newer, more expensive, probably. So they were talking about, like, I think one of them was some kind of UV detection that came off the steering wheel or something, so it could somehow detect the blood alcohol content through your fingers or through the palm of your hand as you're gripping the steering wheel, something crazy sounding like that. And then, of course, there was another one where there would be some kind of a sniffer that would be sniffing the air content in the car, but that would be obviously potentially set off by a passenger in that particular case.
I know one, there was a patent actually recently filed, like super recently, like in the past couple of months, also, you know, in relation to this. So it's somebody is looking to make some money off it is clearly I think what's going on here.
Obviously that's going to be the case.
Yeah. I mean, this stuff wouldn't end up in a bill probably if it wasn't somebody making money on it. Yeah. So, there's, all sorts of stuff that's happening. So let's see here. What else we have? So the safety provisions of the framework don't stop at in-car breathalyzers. On top of anti-impaired driver tech, the spending plan also requires rear guards for semi-trucks to protect passenger vehicles who may rear-end them in the car. Don't ask me. An in-car reminder every time the engine stops for drivers to check their brake seats, least they forget their kids in a hot car. And a study about whether federal crash test dummies accurately measure the impacts on women, the old, and the young. Yeah, so it's got like
Hold on. Read that list one more time.
Okay.
Let's take it one at a time.
On the top of the anti-impaired driver tech, this spending plan also requires rear guards for semi-trucks to protect passenger...
Whoa, is there a comma there? Rear guards for semi-trucks, comma, and then we're getting to another thing?
No.
Or is it rear trucks for semi-trucks to protect passengers?
No comma.
Okay, keep going with that then.
To protect passenger vehicles who may rear-end them.
Okay, how is that going to do anything?
I don't know. An in-car...
rear guards, I'm sorry, rear guards for the trucks. Sorry, I was thinking of it in the reverse. So for passenger vehicles... So there's so they want to add a bumper or something like that to the back of semi-trucks.
Sounds like it.
Okay.
An in-car reminder every time the engine stops for drivers to check their brake seats.
Is there a comma there?
I'm sorry.
Every time the engine stops, comma?
An in-car reminder every time the engine stops. There's no comma here. For drivers to check their back seats, least they forget their kids in a hot car. I did read that wrong slightly, but yeah.
Okay.
So,
wow.
So yeah, you need to be reminded that you have kids apparently, and if you don't have kids,
you're gonna get reminded anyway.
I guess.
Don't forget the kids.
Wow. The funny thing about this is the sort of thing that just you end up learning to ignore.
The beeps and the lights and things like that.
It's one thing if it's used sparingly, but when it's used constantly, you ignore it. And I think the best example of this is actually I think it was Windows. One version of Windows, they started popping up warning messages all the time. And it just got to a point where nobody ever read the security warning messages. So what good were the security warning messages?
Just dismiss.
It was just automatic. And I didn't really run into that too much myself because I don't use Windows, but it's this logic, it's this faulty logic that, if we just warn people about stuff.
Listen, Chris, if it just saves one life.
But it doesn't. It actually makes you less safe. It kind of reminds me of actually this goes to traffic, not computers at this point. But there's signs all over the place. Well, there's some intersections that are particularly have a lot of signage.
Oversigned.
Yeah. And what they found was removing signs actually reduced the number of car accidents.
Yes, I believe that was Denmark.
I think you might be right.
Yeah, they found that not only did it reduce car accidents, but also it increased driver safety. So,
Yeah.
like, I guess sort of an obvious example would be if you're driving around a cliff and there's not a bunch of like guardrails or whatever that are on the edge of the cliff. Are you going to be more cautious about how you drive around that cliff? You're damn right you are. You're not. You know you can't rely on that piece of metal between you and going off the cliff, so you drive a lot more careful in that case. Yeah. And that was a study that was done years ago. We've been talking about that for a long time, and I suspect it's been reproduced. I mean, I would hope that it's been reproduced.
I mean, it's not really surprising, and
it's
I
not.
think I don't know that we've reproduced that. I don't know if that study was been reproduced like specifically, but I think you can certainly look at other examples of if you put something in people's faces too much, it actually has the opposite effect.
Well, and you can see video from some countries where they show like an intersection in, I don't know, India or something like that, where they don't have the kind of budget for road safety technology that they do in the United States or in Europe or whatever. And it looks like pure anarchy with just people just turning whenever they can turn and people going in whatever direction they can get away with going. And it seems like it works out. It looks weird to those of us who are used to obeying the traffic lights and things like that. But it's just humans making decisions about what to do. And obviously there's going to be accidents in that circumstance, but there's obviously accidents today regardless of all of the traffic control devices that they put into place. So I think that having more ability to make decisions on the road is a better thing.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, you're never going to get, the safety is never. You're never going to get safety 100%.
No, of course not. Not when you're dealing with a 2,000-pound hurtling piece of metal.
And but the problem is that you really shouldn't aim for perfection, because the more perfection you try to gain, often you just increase the dangers, or you increase the costs to a point where you actually end up causing harm as a result. Like, for example, maybe there's more people, walking to work or something like that, as opposed to driving, because, in walking to work in dangerous circumstances, like on the side of a highway or something like that, because they can't afford cars. They can't afford the vehicles.
They're getting crazy expensive. They've had all these mandates for so long. There's the EPA and the California mandates that they have to put in all these this equipment under the hood that doesn't have to be there for quote-unquote environmental reasons, and that's been going on for decades. And now add to that all these mandates about having a breathalyzer in cab and mandatory warnings that you might have a kid in the back of the car. I mean, I just can't even. Now I'm wondering what that's going to be like. I mean, what is that? I can
imagine, all these. It's interesting because there's already, I find, vehicles, and I think I'm sure I'm not the only one, but the beeps in vehicles to be distracting and to not know what they mean in the first place, right? Like, so now you're going to add more beeping in the vehicle.
What's that?
Right. Like, and now I'm looking like, is that my phone?
Instead of looking at the
GPS,
road, right?
Navigation. Yeah. Right. Instead of looking at the road. Is that my kids in the back seat that I don't have? I mean,
it's so stupid. I mean, I think you were the one who said that you actually prefer cars pre a certain year because there's certain tech that was mandated, like black boxes or whatever, after a certain year.
Yeah, I mean, probably, I think pre-1996 is like the optimal, but unfortunately that's, I mean, there's not that many, pre-1996 vehicles on the road, and the ones that are, not. So I don't have a pre-1996 vehicle, but basically they instituted a law. I'm pretty sure it was 1996 or right around there, that basically mandated black boxes in all vehicles built after that year, right around that time frame. So that's one of the reasons I'm not a big fan of, more modern vehicles, but it's even worse with even newer vehicles. Now they've got like GPS devices that record, your location in them, and, all sorts of other
literal computer systems that are constantly transmitting data, perhaps, or whatever. And being able to shut down your car remotely, which is, again, what they're likely going to do with this breathalyzer mandate, because they know, drunks are sneaky, right? Like, they know, okay, I'm blowing the tube to start the car, and then they can start drinking, right? But that's why, they're going to keep checking you as you're driving. And if it detects alcohol, it's going to probably take over control of the car, pull the car to the side of the road and then call the police.
Yeah, and you know, it's kind of sad, but oftentimes people will take their kids with them when they're drunk
and have them blow
right,
on
so that the kid can blow into them. But the other thing that's also one of the other dangers of these breath tests or breathalyzers is that because people have to actually like use them while they're driving and they're really challenging to use, it actually creates another hazard there. So it's, you know, and this is when people are not drunk, right?
Yeah.
So if you're randomly forced to use that breathalyzer, as I understand that's how these things work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's and as you pointed out, the objective of that is to stop somebody who's not drunk from using the breathalyzer and then allowing you to drive off drunk. But that doesn't really stop somebody from driving drunk if they take their kid with them, right? They just have the kid blow into them while they're
that's
driving.
why they're going to come up with something that is less or more difficult to fool. They're going to have a new system. There's going to be some new tech that's going to be mandated, and that's why this has been passed. They're going to get rid of the tube thing, and they're going to put something fancy and more expensive in its place. And it's going to be to massive applause. You know, it's going to be a lot of people are going to be cheering this on. They're going to say, yeah, we got to do everything it takes to stop drink. We got to do everything it takes to stop drunk drivers, including inconveniencing everyone who isn't a drinker. Everyone who's a responsible drinker, number one, is going to be inconvenienced by this, and everyone who never drinks is going to have this. This is going to be a mandatory thing in everyone's car, meaning everyone has to pay for this, meaning everyone's price of a car is going to go up as though they weren't already expensive enough. It's going to be terrible.
Yeah, definitely.
And apparently it's 2026 is when this is perhaps as soon as it's going to roll out.
I think
they still have to make decisions.
I think there may be more support now for it, but I think once the tech gets rolled out, I think you're going to see some pushback because I mean, if it's going to be if it's anything like what we've seen thus far, the tech is bad or really bad. And I can't imagine there not being a ton of pushback once this starts rolling out to vehicles. Mandatory, for all vehicles.
It won't be mandatory for older vehicles, at least not that I'm aware of. The proposal is it will be all new vehicles. So, of course, a drunk who knows about this is not going to buy a new vehicle, right? Like they're going to keep to the old cars.
And that's also kind of an interesting point you make because it's probably going to increase the value of the older vehicles.
At least to the drunks or to those who don't want to be hassled by whatever all this nonsense is.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Anything else?
No, not really. I think that's pretty much summarized.
We'll keep our eyes on this as it continues to develop because it'll probably get worse between now and whenever this mandate comes into place. Of course, if you want to comment, you're welcome to join the show. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. All kinds of do-gooder mandates, I guess, we're talking about here. And speaking of drinking and drugging, there's a new proposal that's coming from Donald Trump that's going to sound similar to some of the things we've discussed before, the insane attack on Mexico. We'll talk about it coming up.
Hi, I'm Montel Williams. Most of you know me as a talk show host, but I'm also an author, actor, single father of 4, a fitness writer, avid snowboarder, and I'm also a medical marijuana patient. Like many of the million people who are living with multiple sclerosis, I'm in pain every single day. And sometimes my nerves are so raw that if you brushed up against me in an elevator, I'd scream. I can't sleep at night from the pain, and sometimes the spasms in my legs are so intense they will wake me up throughout the night. I've tried the strongest prescription medications available, and I'm going to tell you, they do not work. In fact, they leave me in a stupor, and most of the time, it's impossible to even live your life. Now, I've tried medical marijuana, and I'm going to tell you something, it works. If you'd like more information about medical marijuana, you can contact the Marijuana Policy Project at mpp.org or call 1-877-JOIN-MPP.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. U.S. President Joe Biden will address the nation later Friday from the Oval Office. He's expected to sign a bipartisan debt ceiling deal into law. On Thursday, the Senate voted to approve the deal with the support of 63 out of 100 senators. FSN's Gabriel Fahmy reports from New York.
The U.S. Congress has voted to cut spending and extend the debt ceiling for 2 years, avoiding a catastrophic default that could have come as soon as Monday. The vote capped off months of melodrama, President Biden tweeting shortly after, "No one gets everything they want in a negotiation, but make no mistake, this bipartisan agreement is a big win for our economy and the American people." Biden brokered the deal with Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy less than a week ago. And despite some resistance from a handful of politicians on both sides of the aisle, it passed swiftly through both the House and the Senate. Gabrielle Fahmy, New York.
An 8-year-old migrant girl who died in U.S. custody last month was denied an ambulance 3 times. That's according to an initial investigation. Anadith Tane Reyes Alvarez, who suffered from a heart condition and a rare blood disorder, died last month inside a Border Patrol station in Harlingen, Texas. FSN's Tony Waterman has more.
Investigators say Reyes Alvarez had about 9 encounters with medical staff while in custody, including seeing a nurse practitioner 4 times on the day she died. She was complaining of nausea and difficulty breathing after a fever of nearly 105 degrees Fahrenheit a few days earlier. After finding her heart rate and oxygen levels to be normal, the nurse denied multiple requests by her family for her to be transferred to a hospital. The report says the nurse also declined to read a pile of documents that belonged to the family, and no one consulted with on-call doctors. Investigators say staff were unaware of the girl's health conditions, although the family had reported it when they were first taken into custody at a different facility. Tony Waterman, Texas.
The U.S. economy added a better-than-expected 339,000 new jobs in May. The latest government data also shows the unemployment rate rose from 3.4% to 3.7%. FSN's Nick Harper reports from Washington.
This is a huge number and smashes expectations, which were in line for about 190,000 new jobs. Of course, all of this as the US Federal Reserve has spent almost a year and a half aggressively raising interest rates to tackle inflation, which should have slowed the jobs market. But this reading now makes it harder for the Fed to pause hikes, as was expected later on this month. With such a large jobs number, further central bank tightening may be ahead. I'm Nick Harper in Washington.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. You can join us here. The number is 603-283-6160. You can bring up anything you want to discuss. 603-283-6160. Free Talk Live. Brought to you this hour by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. And I was really excited to see the folks over at Dash Incubator made an announcement today that Defy the Grid, which is apparently the top sales site for the Goldback product, which we're big fans of here on Free Talk Live. Goldback, of course, is the 1/1000th of an ounce. That's the smallest denomination piece of gold that you can actually put in your wallet and you can spend. It's amazing. It's beautiful. You've got to see. If you've never seen the Goldback, you got to check them out. Defy the Grid is one of dozens of websites online that offer the Goldback for sale. And Dash Incubator announced today that Defy the Grid is now accepting Dash for Goldbacks and other gold and silver products. So I think that's great news. For me, it's a perfect combination to have Goldbacks on one hand that you can have physically with you anywhere you go, which I do, and then also have Dash as a actually useful cryptocurrency. Low fees. You want to talk about low fees? Bitcoin fees are like $2 a piece, I think, median price last time I checked, which was a few days ago. Dash fees are way less than 1 cent per transaction. Dash is very, very useful as a cryptocurrency, and now you can even use it to buy your gold and silver with, which I think is just a great thing to have. And Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies. It's widely available on exchanges and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get. It's easy to use Dash. You can start by learning more at Dash.org. Big thanks to the Dash Decentralized Autonomous Organization for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. You can visit Dash.org to learn about Dash. That is Dash.org. Let's go to Sheriff David Hathaway. He's on the line with us from, I believe, South Arizona, where you live and are the sheriff of Santa Cruz County. David, welcome.
Yeah, good evening, Ian. I want to talk about a couple things. I want to talk about how I lived in a city of 1 million people in South America that had no traffic control devices, no stop signs, no red lights, green lights, no yield signs, nothing, and it worked out very fine. Like, it was just very organic the way people organized. There will be a buildup on one side of the intersection, and then when there's a gap in traffic, that side just goes, and it just keeps going until the traffic is sparse, and then somebody noses in the other direction, and then that side dominates the intersection for however long, 30 seconds or a minute. And
amazing.
It's the biggest city in Bolivia. It's called Santa Cruz de la Sierra in Bolivia. It's not the capital city, but it's the biggest city in kind of the tropical area. But I also wanted to mention there was a caller a few nights ago that wanted to make my immigration book into an audio book, and he was wondering how to get a hold of me. And I give out my email address to everybody. It's real simple, just sheriffdavidhathaway@gmail.com. No weird spelling, no weird punctuation, just sheriffdavidhathaway@gmail.com if anybody ever wants to get a hold of me. But
thank you
anyway,
for that. So let's go back to Bolivia for a moment. So when was this that you were living down there? And when you got to the city, you obviously come from the United States. Was this how big of a shock to the system was this change for you?
No, it was not a big change. We lived, me and my wife lived in South America a total of 8 years during my time with DEA. And she grew up along the border here too, along the Mexican border. So she speaks Spanish. We both went to school here and had our little part-time jobs at McDonald's and whatnot along the border. So we both had grown up in a Spanish-speaking environment. So she did just fine down there. It was of the kind of the embassy community, she's the only wife that stuck it out down there because it was very friendly people, very nice lifestyle. But a lot of the people, they wanted more the U.S. lifestyle, the U.S. conveniences. But we enjoyed it, and it was real nice. The years we were in Bolivia was 1991 to 1996, and then we lived on a separate assignment 3 years in Paraguay. And
so you were already in South
Paraguay.
America before going to Bolivia? You were elsewhere?
No, we went to Paraguay after that, and my wife and children came along on that assignment too. But yeah, we'd both grown up along the border, so we were familiar with
I guess my question was more specifically about the traffic, though. Like, was that a shock to you to go from, the United States, where there's a ton of signage and a ton of safety measures in place, to having virtually none of that, it sounds like? What was that like?
Yeah, it was. It was a shock, and I didn't know how it would work out. And I had a vehicle there. I had a Toyota Land Cruiser, and we drove, every day on the city streets. And it was, very dense population. A lot of these third world countries are like that, very dense population. But it was very self-organizing. And of course, the people down there, the drivers down there, grew up in that environment. So it wasn't like they were trying to. Yeah, they weren't trying to invent solutions, but it's very natural. Like, you flow up to an intersection, there's already traffic going perpendicular, if it's a busy intersection, and you just kind of wait until there's a break in the traffic, and then your side starts going, and then they dominate the intersection until the traffic flow reduces. And it wasn't like, collisions or confusion, and you actually are paying attention to what you're doing. It's not hard. It's not chaotic. And when
if anything, you've got to pay attention more, right? Like, you've got to be really looking out for what's going on. You can't just rely on some light.
Not really necessarily, because it is very natural how the traffic flow develops, and you're not distracted by a bunch of signs and lights and trying to figure out, what does this mean? Can I really turn now? Is the intersection really clear just because I got a green arrow? You're paying attention, but the flow is natural. It's not like people are trying to, cut each other off.
No, I see what you're saying. If you're not at the front of the group, then you can kind of go with the flow. But if you're at the front, you got to pay attention, right? Because then you got to see, who's coming and who's not. And by the way, it's not to say you shouldn't pay attention if there's traffic devices. Obviously, you should look before you go through an intersection because there's always a chance that some psycho is going to be, running through a red or whatever. But yeah, so
you're actually focused on what matters. Just like your example of the cliff and the guardrail.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of relying on some sign or on some, supposed safety device, you're actually observing the environment, the weather, right, the shape of the road, what the road's made out of. Is it dirt? Is it asphalt? Is it sloping? The things that really matter, rather than taking counsel from some sign telling you what you should do.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. So we don't quite have that here in the United States, probably anywhere, but in New Hampshire, we don't have stop signs at our intersections. Don't get me wrong.
We do.
They do.
There's some right
not
here.
Everywhere.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is my street doesn't have a stop sign. And if you go over to West Keene, most of the streets over there don't have stop signs.
You mean if you're like coming off your street onto the main street that you're turning onto?
Yeah.
Okay.
And people always know to stop, but it's obvious that you need to stop. But it's like you don't need a stop sign there. And in Keene, we don't have stop signs.
Yeah,
everywhere.
I think New England has a little bit of this, and the one time I went back down to Florida to see my parents like a decade ago, I was seeing they were putting in the roundabouts there as well. But we have these roundabouts here, which are a little taste of that, right? Where people actually have to just go and make their own decisions about when to enter into the roundabout and when to leave it and all that.
It's funny.
But that's about as far as it goes.
That's exactly
in the US.
this sort of situation where the signage I think helps, because people don't know going into the rotaries or circles or whatever you want to call them what to do when they're not from the north, especially when they're not from the Northeast. So
well, I mean that's the point I think David's making is down there they probably don't have roundabouts. It's just raw intersection and you just got to figure it out. And people figure it out. And I think that's and when you watch the videos of this stuff, you can kind of see the flows you're talking about, almost how when you in nature you have like the birds that fly in a pattern, and this is sort of similar to that, but with human beings. These sort of native natural patterns sort of emerge.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the clips that make it to YouTube where they show uncontrolled intersections in foreign countries, they're trying to take the most sensational clip they can find that looks like the most chaotic. They're not out on a scientific study to show, okay, what is the natural flow that develops? They're kind of sort of trying to find things that look out of control and uploading those because they think they'll get more views on those. But if they kind of just did a more sensible approach of let's just go study some of these intersections in these countries that have had that forever, since the whole lives of the people that live there and drive there, they would see like a very natural flow. But I've seen those YouTube videos that are trying almost to pick, film a whole day and then pick the 10-minute portion that looks the most chaotic and upload that. Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that story, David. Was there anything else you wanted to share tonight?
No, that's it. I'm enjoying the show. Thank you, guys.
All right, very good. Thanks for the call tonight. The number is 603-283-6160, saying he was in the largest city in Bolivia with 1 million people for years where there were no traffic signs, no traffic lights whatsoever, and everything was fine. I mean, obviously, accidents are going to happen, but he didn't say that accidents were happening more often. And that would be an interesting study to look at, to compare cities.
Yeah.
Look at this Bolivian city and then look at a city in the U.S. that has a similar population and maybe similar population density if you can find it. And then also, what are the traffic fatalities like? I'd be curious about that. Since we're talking about safety and mandates, well, I don't know if you've been following this, Chris, but in the retail world, in big cities in the United States, we've started to see a locking up of the product. And for instance, in Walgreens, maybe you've seen the videos where in San Francisco, people will just walk into CVS or Walgreens with a big knapsack or whatever and just start throwing items into it and then just walk out the front door, just stealing hundreds, if not thousands of dollars worth of merchandise. And so in order to try to stay in business, they have started locking up the items. Have you seen any of this going on?
I mean, I have actually. It's actually funny. I didn't even know like this was a thing, at one point in my life where like they would lock stuff up. I remember going into a department store once and, trying on clothes and getting yelled at because I went into like, the changing room and I didn't know that I was supposed to like check in with somebody before I went in, because I guess people they put their clothes on and they walk out.
Sure.
And I never encountered that before.
Where is this, in like a city or something?
I imagine it was. I know it wasn't where I lived, and I lived in a fairly rural town. It was a little larger than Keene at the time.
Yeah, they weren't having huge theft issues in the town.
Yeah, but yeah, it's very interesting to see. You go into certain cities and have these very, very high theft areas where they have to lock up everything.
It's crazy. In fact, that's the story here about Walgreens in Chicago, where they're now locking so much up at the store. There are only 2 aisles of products now that customers are allowed to access on their own. The rest of the aisles are all locked down. Some shoppers, according to the U.S. Sun in Chicago, Illinois, aren't too sure about the new kiosk technology rolled out at the downtown Walgreens. Executives at the company made significant changes to prevent theft that have been on the rise in grocery stores around the United States since last year. However, earlier this year, during an earnings call with Walgreens investors, the company's chief financial officer noted that they may have been a bit dramatic. He says, maybe we cried too much last year? Maybe it's supposed to be tried too much? Anyway, it's too late for Windy City residents as a redesigned Walgreens with considerable anti-theft measures opened this week. Customers will now be unable to shop for themselves, save 2 small aisles of essentials, according to the source. The news outlet shared a photo of a digital kiosk where customers choose the items they would like to buy. Shoppers then pick up their products at a checkout counter after an employee receives or retrieves the shopping haul.
This is kind of funny because this is going back to what the situation used to be back in the day. I don't know how far back you have to go, but it used to be when you would purchase goods, there would be a clerk, and you'd go up to a counter basically, and the clerk would then go and get the goods from the store and bring them to you.
I remember a store that did that. It was called Service Merchandise back in the 1980s and the 90s. They had one where I was growing up, and I think there were some items that were on the shelf, but the higher ticket items you had to take a little tag up to the cashier. And then they would go ahead and they'd order it from the stock room, and some kid in the stock room would shove them out on a conveyor belt.
I think this is a little bit different than that situation, but I know what you're talking about, like Toys R Us with video games and things like that.
They did that too.
And East Staples, the high ticket items, electronic items would be locked up, from laptops to back in the 90s it would have been like DVD players and maybe click discs. I'm sure nobody probably remembers those, but zip drives maybe.
But now they're talking about it's going to be your toothpaste. Now it's going to be the hair dye. Now it's going to be...
So it sounds more like what used to exist, way back in the day before department stores.
See, now this is before my time. I mean, you weren't... Did you ever see this? Or
Oh, no. I never encountered this. I'm just aware that, I think it was before department stores, before the big department stores.
Are we talking about like pre-Woolworths or something like that? Or like around
I believe so. Yeah, I think we're talking about like early 1900s before...
I suspect we're summoning Major Payne now, and he's gonna let us know where the way things used to be. If it was like this.
Who's 100 years old who's listening, because we need you to call in. You might remember some of this.
So, and the weird thing about this is it's like, if you're going to make me order on a computer screen, why am I going to come into your store in the first place? What's the convenience? I mean,
I could probably answer that is, you're probably going to be able to pick it up within a couple of minutes as opposed to a day, 2 days, 3 days, a week, depending on where you are and how quickly deliveries might get to you.
It's going to be frustrating though. I mean, you have to wait on an employee to go out, find the items that you want. Hopefully they get the right ones.
Yeah.
And then they bring them up to the front counter, and then you can check out. It's going to definitely increase the time it takes, especially if the place is busy. Now how many employees are they going to have in the store to go and pick for shoppers? So they're going to lose, I think, some number of customers, right? Because you're in a hurry, right? The reason you go to a convenience store, the reason you go to a Walgreens or a CVS is because it's 24 hours a day. You know the products that you need. You're going to pay more because it's convenient, but you're willing to, so you go in and you pay the extra price.
You may run. What's interesting about this is you may run into this. How do I say this? More in places that are high crime ridden, and there may not be as much competition, so you may not have as much of a choice.
You may not have other options.
Yeah, there may not be other options.
Well, that's what I guess the other option would be to just shop online, right? And I think this is going to drive a lot more. I don't know what percentage more, and obviously Walmart or Walgreens in this case is experimenting with this. They're going to see. They're going to find out how much sales are going to go down, because I'm going to predict they're going to go down somewhat. But the question is, are the losses they were taking, which must have been heavy, they were taking heavy losses, is it going to be evened out in that they're not going to lose as much as far as shrink is concerned, as they call it in the business and retail, but they also may lose some legitimate sales from people who are just like, there's 3 people in line, it's going to take me a half hour, I'm not going to wait for this.
If I had to speculate, their losses probably ended up exceeding 3%, because I know that was
there's a certain acceptable amount.
That's I think the industry standard, and it's usually once it hits 3%, that's when the stores start adding cameras or adding more security measures of this nature. And that's just, and I only know that because I used to work in a retail store, and that's what I was told by management. So,
well, it would be interesting. I mean, they're not going to disclose the info, but it would be really interesting to know just how bad it got.
Yeah,
Were they at 10%? Were they at 12%? What was it that made them decide? All right, we just got to try something different. And so now they're bringing in kiosks. Walmart issued a statement about the changes to a customer who feared the store was closed for good. Quote, the redesigned store will have the latest in e-commerce offerings to increase customer service, mitigate theft, and increase safety for our customers and employees, said the retailer in an email. The pharmacy also has a kiosk system. 2 employees monitor the essentials section where you can, quote, shop for yourself, unquote. The area includes 2 rows of shelves that are under 5 feet tall, so team members can observe what customers are doing at all times. But of course, as we've seen in these cities, the thieves don't give a damn if they're being observed. I mean, in the videos that they put online, these people are so brazen. They're not like trying to conceal it. They're literally coming in with a huge bag and just grabbing stuff off the shelf and shoving it in the bag and running or walking out the front door like they own the place. And, of course, the store security is told they really can't do very much. They can't really, hurt these people for whatever reason. Or they're not willing to take on the liability of what might happen, potential lawsuits, etc. So they just let them walk out the door. And then, of course, in California, they've apparently stopped enforcing theft under, I think it's $900 or whatever. So it has to be like felony level theft for the police to actually even do anything about it. So these people are able to just collect hundreds of dollars in product and walk out the door. So how is 5-foot shelves going to stop that from happening? How is having an employee watching these people stealing going to change anything? I don't know. I guess we're going to find out. Any other items aside from the 2 small aisles of essentials require customers to use a kiosk station to digitally select items and pick them up later on. Let us do the shopping, read a sign sitting next to the order station. Shoppers have no choice if they want to obtain anything from Walgreens, quote, full selection. The sign also urged Chicago customers to, quote, relax while we shop for you, and informed them they could pick up their items at the Pickup/FedEx Western Union counter. A company spokesperson told the publication Thursday that Walgreens desires to improve the customer experience with the changes, and the Chicago location serves as a test run. They said the retailer is, quote, testing a new experience at the store with new concepts, technologies, and practices to enhance the experiences of our customers and team members.
It sounds like a very much a challenge if you're looking for something and you need the product information.
Yes, it does. Like you want to actually shop.
One of the one of the problems that I sometimes find is when I'm looking at, products is that online is that you don't really get the information on the box. Mm-hmm. So like you sometimes have to like hunt down like actual photos, like on
looking elsewhere,
right? Like you might have to go on eBay to find a picture of like the actual box to find out if it's, what you actually want or not, because it's just, they don't actually provide everything on the product page.
And hey, you and I, we're pretty connected, right? Like we can do this. It's no problem. Oh, yeah. We can go find the eBay items, and we can find the large, high resolution images of the back of the box, and we're good. But what about the people that are not so experienced when it comes to online anything? I mean, believe it or not, even though we exist in this online world, there are still people out there that do not have an interest in doing online anything.
I can tell you that they exist because I deal with them every day. I have a business, and I can't tell you how many people call up my company, and I'm not the first person to answer the phone, but oftentimes people are asking questions and they're so hard to deal with. I got to deal with them.
But these are people who have at least gone to your website at some point and ordered a product, and they have questions or whatever, right?
Somehow, not always.
Really?
Yeah. Sometimes we get callers, and we're actually kind of wondering like what's going on, because how did they, right? Like how are they? Okay, their product information's right there, or like on the web page. Like how do you not know the answer to your own question? Like, how did you find the phone number in order to call us? Because the phone number is funny, because the phone number, we don't have the phone number like,
it's front and center.
Prominent, right? It's not prominent front and center at the top or anything like that. You actually have to open a product page, and it's on every single product page, but it's in the bottom lower right.
Sure.
So you have to actually already go through like specification, like scroll down through specification information,
which could answer your question.
Right, which could answer your question in most cases. Yeah. So to give us a call. So it's like, how did you, and what I've found, I think over the years, is that often people have gotten like our phone number from other people who like are more tech savvy.
I see. Look, just call these guys.
Yeah, and they can help you. And I mean, in some respect, that's exactly, that's what we do. Yeah. We help people who may not be as tech savvy. Sure. That's why we have a phone number. But it's just amazing that people, call us up to place orders and, do all the things. And especially because we sell computers. So and we sell Linux computers. So like, there's this perception that, Linux users are technical, and it's not the case. But it's just really entertaining, I think, because there are really a lot of people out there who are not, they're just not.
And there's some people who don't even use computers, is the point I'm trying to make. There's some people who they don't have a smartphone.
But
they don't have
even
a
the people who do are not tech savvy.
Sure, that's true. The number here, if you want to join us, is 603-283-6160. I just feel bad for anybody that doesn't use computers, because now they're going to have to be going into these stores and having to have other people shop for them, and it's going to suck. More coming up.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. It's physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com. The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount. What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? you can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next, after the news, here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. U.S. President Joe Biden will address the nation later Friday from the Oval Office. He's expected to sign a bipartisan debt ceiling deal into law. On Thursday, the Senate voted to approve the deal with the support of 63 out of 100 senators. FSN's Gabriel Fahmy reports from New York.
The U.S. Congress has voted to cut spending and extend the debt ceiling for 2 years, avoiding a catastrophic default that could have come as soon as Monday. The vote capped off months of melodrama, President Biden tweeting shortly after, "No one gets everything they want in a negotiation, but make no mistake, this bipartisan agreement is a big win for our economy and the American people." Biden brokered the deal with Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy less than a week ago. And despite some resistance from a handful of politicians on both sides of the aisle, it passed swiftly through both the House and the Senate. Gabrielle Fahmy, New York.
An 8-year-old migrant girl who died in U.S. custody last month was denied an ambulance 3 times. That's according to an initial investigation. Anadith Tane Reyes Alvarez, who suffered from a heart condition and a rare blood disorder, died last month inside a Border Patrol station in Harlingen, Texas. FSN's Tony Waterman has more.
Investigators say Reyes Alvarez had about 9 encounters with medical staff while in custody, including seeing a nurse practitioner 4 times on the day she died. She was complaining of nausea and difficulty breathing after a fever of nearly 105 degrees Fahrenheit a few days earlier. After finding her heart rate and oxygen levels to be normal, the nurse denied multiple requests by her family for her to be transferred to a hospital. The report says the nurse also declined to read a pile of documents that belonged to the family, and no one consulted with on-call doctors. Investigators say staff were unaware of the girl's health conditions, although the family had reported it when they were first taken into custody at a different facility. Tony Waterman, Texas.
The U.S. economy added a better-than-expected 339,000 new jobs in May. The latest government data also shows the unemployment rate rose from 3.4% to 3.7%. FSN's Nick Harper reports from Washington.
This is a huge number and smashes expectations, which were in line for about 190,000 new jobs. Of course, all of this as the US Federal Reserve has spent almost a year and a half aggressively raising interest rates to tackle inflation, which should have slowed the jobs market. But this reading now makes it harder for the Fed to pause hikes, as was expected later on this month. With such a large jobs number, further central bank tightening may be ahead. I'm Nick Harper in Washington.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, what to make of the news that America will not default on its debts. The country's date with economic catastrophe has been averted as a result of a political deal forged at the 11th hour between President Joe Biden and his Republican opponents. David Smith is Washington correspondent for Britain's Guardian newspaper.
It has happened before, most notably about a decade ago when there was a similar standoff and a threat of default. And in fact, one of the credit agencies lowered America's credit rating because of doubts over whether it would pay its bills. This time, in what's a very divided, politically polarized era, Republicans were not just going to lift this debt limit without making some demands to curb spending and impose various conservative priorities. Republicans did get some of what they wanted. In terms of the forthcoming budget, spending is pretty much frozen for the next year, apart from defense. But Joe Biden also managed to protect a lot of his priorities around climate and other things. Perhaps it was inevitable in the end. Even they realized a default would be too catastrophic to contemplate.
And indeed, default would have resulted in economic contagion all over the world. The compromise, though, only gets the country to 2025. You can expect to hear a lot more about America's debt ceiling in 2 years' time. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
The main news again. President Biden prepares to address the nation from the Oval Office after signing a bipartisan debt ceiling deal into law. According to an initial investigation, an 8-year-old migrant girl who died in U.S. custody last month was denied an ambulance 3 times. And some good news for the U.S. economy with a better-than-expected jobs report for May. That is the latest feature story news. Ira Spitzer reporting.
I just got off the phone with New York. We are the #1 network in the world. And it is an honor to stand before you at such an exciting time. We're stretching boundaries that will irreparably alter people's perception of what they are willing to watch. And our next season will offer tantalizing programming that plays seamlessly into the desire of our viewers. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you just a taste of what ODS has to offer.
You know the rules. Grow a pumpkin or go home. Here's the twist. Only one of you has the real pumpkin seeds.
Are you a pumpkin or not?
You call yourselves pumpkin growers?
I know I didn't get the pumpkin seeds. I dug in there. They're bean sprouts.
Starting a pumpkin alliance. Anyone grows a pumpkin, we split the money.
Get out of my patch.
This is the Onion News Network.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, and we're kicking off the second hour of the program. The phones are open. If you want to join the show, the number is 603-283-6160. Maybe you live in one of these more urban areas where stores like Walgreens, in this case is what we're discussing, CVS, are putting into place new anti-theft measures. Not only are they locking up product because of massive theft, but they're also now having customers order at a kiosk, and then the employees will go and shop for the customer, which, of course, is a huge inconvenience in a lot of ways. I mean, for some people, they might find it convenient, right? People that just want other people to do things for them. But for those of us, as you pointed out, Chris, what if you want to actually look at the details of a product? What if you don't know what you want? It's fine if you know what you want, right? Like if you are going into one of these places, you're like, I got to get this exact product because I always buy it and I know what it is. And okay, fine. You order that, you wait, they bring it to you. But what if you're not sure? Like you're trying to figure out.
I can see, somebody who's maybe got a medical issue needing to find out what ingredients are in the product.
Absolutely.
Right? Or maybe they have an allergy or something.
What if you just want to go and smell the scents of a shampoo aisle, right? Like that's a nice thing to do. I don't want to get a scent that doesn't smell good. I want to have something that's smells right for me, right? Yup, sorry, it's all locked up. And now you have to wait on an employee to stand there with you as you sample these things.
And it's kind of interesting because it's like, are you supposed to be like, okay, can you bring me all your shampoos? Like
it's
a sample of
ridiculous.
each of your shampoo. I mean, you got 20 shampoos on the shelf. Is the employee supposed to go and get each one of them?
Obviously, that's not going to happen.
You then get to decide which shampoo you want.
I mean, I guess in theory, you could go with an employee. They could open up the lockbox and then give you access.
Are you going to be allowed behind the counter? It sounds like that's not how they're doing
I don't know. That's a good question, right? So, like, are they going to have
they have
all
a kiosk.
Yeah, that's a good question, is how is this store going to be laid out? Because what we've seen is they're trying to retrofit. On older stores, they're just adding lock cases to the existing shelving. But if they're going to redesign an entire store around anti-theft, then yeah, you might be right. There just might not be any aisles whatsoever. And it's just going to be kiosks everywhere, and then people in a large stock room that are going to be picking product. Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah, so we don't really know what this is going to be like, unless, did they open the thing yet? Or is it something they're just talking about?
I'd love to see pictures of this.
No, it's rolled out. Okay, so the store itself looks like an older, at least as far as the photo that's here in this story, the outside of the store looks pretty similar. There's only one. Yeah, so these are just locked up. Okay, so it's an older Walgreens with just a bunch of locking cases now. So you can still walk around the store. You can still look and see what's on the shelves.
Okay.
But
you still can't see the product information on the back of the product or anything like that. Yeah.
Nope. You cannot pull the product off the shelf on your own volition and examine it. And as you might imagine, this is going to upset some people. We'll talk about that here, but we summoned him. Major Payne is on the line in Michigan, because you had said, Chris, that in the old days, this is actually how it used to work in some stores.
You'd go up to, I believe the way it was is you'd go into a store, but it was like there was a counter, and then everything was behind the counter, and then an employee would go and wherever the product was, get that product for you and bring it back to you.
What about that, Major Payne? Do you remember that from back in the day?
I think this predates all of us. There are almost all of us alive today.
I don't remember that, but the big bulk goods like the bulky things, the blankets and the bags of beans and whatnot, they'd be out there where the customers could wander around and check it out, because the ladies like to look at the different materials and whatnot for the dress making. But all the canned goods and bullets and, things that belong on shelves, that stuff was all behind the counter.
Oh, you remember this? Sounds like you remember this.
From watching old Westerns, pretty much.
Okay.
You're saying this is way back. This is the 1800s.
I think this was, I think this would have been probably early 1900s before the the big department store. I think the department stores is what changed that to where you can actually walk into a store and look around the store. I think before that, everything was basically locked up and you just walk in and there would be a counter.
Was that due to theft back then? Or
I think it was to protect the goods. Yeah.
Makes sense.
This was before cameras and things like that. So.
Yeah, obviously.
There was a couple old hardware stores I remember, and they'd probably been handed down from grandfather or father to son, right? There was 100-year-old stock in some of these things. And a lot, I know buying many things, I'd look at the price and says, damn, that box price ain't been changed in 35, 40 years. But all the exterior walls were ceiling to floor shelves, and they had the old rolling ladders that went along the wall,
Oh, yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, and you wouldn't have a chance without the old boy that owned the store, because he's the only one that knew where everything was.
Right. All right.
But there was a couple. There was a store in the town I grew up in, and it's kind of funny you guys are talking about the blow tubes in cars now. We had a drive-through beer store.
Yeah, we had one of those where I grew up too.
Yep.
Actually, I think it was a packaged liquor store. I think you could drive through and get liquor too at this store.
Huh.
I was going to tell you another one too. I ran into this. I don't remember if I was in Wyoming or Montana. I think Montana. But I found a bar with a drive-through.
Yeah. Wow.
And they had a really weakly written state statute that basically just said all to-go liquor has to be in a sealed container. So that just meant they put the lid on the top and they didn't poke the straw through the hole, and they were good to
go. It's sealed.
So you could pull up and get, 2 margaritas and 2 gin and tonics and 2 rum and cokes and hit the highway.
What's interesting is that in other countries you can buy beer at gas stations. They just sell it out in the open. So.
You can do that in most places.
Out west, you can buy guns and ammo at the gas station.
You can buy beer here in New Hampshire at the gas station, dude.
Oh, no. I mean, outside, not inside the gas station. You're thinking of it inside a physical store. I'm talking about literally buying beer, without getting out of your car.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, a little bit different.
Somebody comes up and hands
the gas attendant will hand you a beer, okay. Cases of beer, right? Because they're right there.
Got it.
Advertised, open, stacks of beer right next to the gas pumps.
All right. What else, Major?
Well, I got a good segue for you on your Trump Mexico thing. You know what the cartels are up to now? A couple of the rural provinces. One of them is Michoacan. I think the other one might be Chihuahua. Very, very rural, very small villages, isolated. The cartel is taking drones, and they rigged them up so they can drop some homemade bombs. And they're running all the villagers out of the provinces, trying to take over the whole damn countryside.
Where'd you hear that?
I just heard it on the radio a couple days ago. It was on Relevant Radio.
Yeah. I'm going to call into question any claims about what the cartels are doing. And it just all sounds like propaganda to me, because the other side of the story when it comes to cartels is usually they treat the people of any given area better than the government does. The cartels.
That's what I'd heard. I'd heard that rhetoric before.
Yeah,
too,
the cartels help a lot of people. They help a lot of people out down there when the government isn't going to do jack diddly for people. It's the cartels that are helping people in various different ways.
Yeah, I mean the cartels they want people on their side because
do.
they have they don't want people ratting them out. They don't want the cops coming in. They want to go under the radar.
So anything that's talking bad about the cartels, I'm going to call as potential propaganda by the United States to justify a war.
Well, when they first started out with the story, I heard the cartels using drones to bomb locals. I'm thinking,
doesn't make sense.
Oh, they must be attacking the federales.
Yeah, that
but
could be.
It wasn't so.
It doesn't make sense that they would bomb locals. It's just that doesn't make business sense for them. Thank you for the call tonight, Major. I appreciate hearing from you. And you're going to hear more of this, just as what we were saying the other night, and I'm sorry I don't know who it was that originated this quote, but the first casualty of war is the truth, right? And we've seen that with Ukraine, where you don't know what either side is saying is true. You have no idea what's actually going on because you cannot trust either side. And look, I'm not saying trust the cartel, okay? But there's certain things that make sense and other things that don't make sense. And it doesn't make sense for them to attack the people who are their neighbors, who otherwise they could be engendering good feelings with and help protect them, essentially.
Yeah, what's interesting is, like, if you look at some of the interviews that they've done with cartels and things, like over the years, like media and different media outlets, one of the things that you'll notice is that the cartels, it's not that they won't attack, like, the police, for example, but they don't attack the police if they'll take a bribe, right?
Sure.
So it's not quite what people make it out to be. The reason that they get violent is often because, well, certain people aren't taking the bribes. They're not out to kill you,
right? And usually the violence is against other cartels, and not against randos on the street or whatever. That doesn't make sense for them to do.
Why spend a bullet when you don't have to?
So we can talk about the cartels here in a little bit because that is also in the news, but just continuing on the story about Walgreens locking down their inventory. They say that customers will have an area in which they can pick up orders, digital kiosks for placing the orders, as well as an area to shop for essential items. Despite the digital upgrades, so-called, and efforts to ensure a safe shopping experience, customers went online to voice their disapproval of the changes, as reported by Lipstick Alley, some website. "This is dumb," said one customer. "Sadly, I can see more stores doing this. We are definitely living in the twilight zone now." Another customer said, "I knew this would happen. Next stop will be having to scan an ID or credit card before being able to enter the store at all."
That's the thing I find most disturbing. It's not that they're locking stuff behind the counter. It's, wanting IDs and things like that.
Which, of course, if you're ordering online, you got to put a credit card in there unless they take crypto.
Yep.
So, you're going to have to ID yourself in that case.
That's why I prefer crypto.
Yep.
But you still have to give them your name, in order to get it delivered, and an address.
You have to give them a name, right?
Well, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But of course, if it's with the credit card, then
they know.
You can get credit cards that are not in your name, though. But
prepaid cards. Well, no, even those they want you to give a social security number for.
No, even like a bank, if you go and you get a debit card or something like that, you can get them in whatever name you want,
like a corporate name or something. Or
yeah,
they're not gonna let you put any old name on there.
Yeah, they will.
Without showing paperwork, you're gonna have to show paperwork.
No, you're gonna have to show them your ID to open the bank account, right? A driver's license.
Yeah.
But what's on the physical card doesn't have to be your name. It can be any name. Yeah, PayPal, same thing. You can get names and other, or cards and other people's names.
Another customer said, "This is why I do 95% of my shopping online. I don't like being treated like a criminal." Others defended Walgreens' decision and noted that shoplifting and crime are to blame for the new experience at the Chicago location. Quote, "This is where we're headed. Criminality has infested American culture. Companies are going to do what they can to prevent theft, which includes making it more difficult to steal. Whether this is going to put this company out of business or not remains to be seen. How much their business is going to drop, I don't know. But I don't know if I agree that criminality has infested American culture. For instance, here in Keene, New Hampshire, population 20,000 roughly, you can walk into the CVS here at 2 in the morning and good luck finding an employee.
Yeah.
Like, if you actually need help with something, you got to look around that store, or I think they might have a buzzer or a bell or something like that at the front of the store.
Definitely
so
a bell.
You can ding them
buzzer.
up there.
Yep.
But it's like There's one employee watching over this entire store of merchandise. And so there's literally, I mean, beyond the cameras that are present, there's literally no security at the Keene CVS, which is a whole other world from what we're talking about here in Chicago, where nearly every product, it sounds like 80% of the store is under lock and key, and you have to order through some kind of kiosk. So, the problem of criminality that they're talking about, quote unquote, infesting American culture, it hasn't made its way to, at the very least, Keene, New Hampshire quite yet. Now, as I understand it, in Manchester, you are more likely to, which is the, quote, big city here in New Hampshire with 125,000 people, you are more likely to see, like, bums on the street, heroin needles, and things like that. And where you've got people like that, you are more likely to have people that are stealing from, convenience stores and that.
Yeah, I don't know about the CVS's, but you're probably more likely to get shot if you rob the wrong store in
New Hampshire.
In New Hampshire, just because there are convenience stores and people do have guns behind the counter. So
yeah, that much is true. The rest of the story here, though, from another customer saying this was definitely coming. Shoplifting is beyond out of control. I'm not too surprised, and I'm not mad at it. Stealing has gotten out of control, and there's now whole online communities dedicated to it, said a third person. So, and that's what they say is behind the massive thefts that are happening at these stores, is they're like essentially online secondhand sales rings that use homeless people. This is what I've heard, at least. It's going on out in California, so it's probably happening in Chicago as well. They recruit homeless people who have absolutely nothing to live for. They just don't, they just want to get their next hit of crack or whatever it is, heroin. And so, we'll just go into the Walgreens, load up this backpack or whatever full of product, and we'll give you a crack rock or whatever, or, $20 or whatever it is they're paying them. I don't know what kind of cut they're getting out of this. But then they bring the product back to the gangster, whoever it is that hired them. The gangster has his way of selling these products on sites like eBay, for instance, where they sell them at full price. They get them at near to zero price, or whatever it is they got to pay the homeless person to go in and do the job. So apparently a lot of these products that are being stolen from the Walgreens to CVS are just getting resold online by essentially gangs that are doing this at a very, very large level. Like they're renting warehouses and storing inventory in warehouses they're stealing from these stores. It's crazy. So if you want to comment, you can join the show here. The number is 603-283-6160. And some stores are just saying, you know what? We're out. They're not even bothering with the locking down of the products. They're just saying, this isn't worth it to be in these places. And there's a story here from the San Francisco Standard about Nordstrom, which is planning to close both of its downtown San Francisco stores, choosing not to renew its lease obligations at its location in Westfield Mall. It will also close a second nearby downtown store called Nordstrom Rack. The retailer confirmed the closures recently. In an email to employees, the company's chief stores officer wrote that, quote, the dynamics of the downtown San Francisco market have changed dramatically over the past several years, impacting customer foot traffic to our stores and our ability to operate successfully. The two planned closures represent about 357,000 square feet of retail space, according to the San Francisco Business Times. Remember, it was just several weeks ago that we had a story about how Whole Foods closed their San Francisco location. Now, Whole Foods was saying, well, we're going to see if we can reopen it with some changes or whatever. So maybe they're planning to go a Walgreens route and starting to lock down a lot of the store. But due to safety issues for their staff, they did not feel as though they could continue operating and keep their staff safe from, whatever crazed bums or whoever it is that are on the streets, potentially putting them in danger. So they're closing up by the end of August, and also another one of the Nordstroms on July 1st. And of course, Nordstrom is, as I understand it, a fairly high-end shopping experience. I think there was one where I grew up in Florida, and I went there once with my parents or whatever.
Is this like a grocery store? Or
No. This is
what kind of store is this?
Imagine like an upscale JCPenney.
Okay.
Or Sears or something like that, where probably not Sears isn't the right term. I'm pretty sure Nordstrom is like focused on wearables. But I could be wrong about that. but they're generally considered like a fancier kind of shopping experience. And downtown San Francisco just isn't the place for a fancy shopping kind of experience. You're just going to get targeted by gangs. The mall said that this is a statement from the mall's owner in a statement that the planned closure, quote, underscores the deteriorating situation in downtown San Francisco. A growing number of retailers and businesses are leaving the area due to the unsafe conditions for customers, retailers, and employees, coupled with the fact that these significant issues are preventing an economic recovery of the area. And if you've been paying attention, you know that things got much, much worse. I mean, they were bad in San Francisco from, what you hear about things. I don't live there, but I've visited there a couple times in the last 2 decades for conferences or whatever, and never really got to experience most of the city because it's one of those things where you fly in, you take a cab to the hotel, you do the conference, and then you leave. Maybe you explore the block or two around the hotel, but that was about it. So I can't say I have any kind of a feel for what things were like. But if you talk to people who grew up there, you talk to people who live there, and they tell you it's just swirling down the toilet bowl in the city. And then it got much worse during COVID because then there was the lockdowns, of course, that happened. And San Francisco was known for being one of the worst of all of the places in the United States. The most kind of China-like of the places was San Francisco with the most serious lockdowns. A lot of small businesses went out of business during that time frame. They never came back. So, once you start losing businesses out of like strip malls and actual malls or whatever, they start looking empty. And there's just this kind of feeling that develops of decline, right? Like if you've got a shopping center and it's 50% full, that doesn't look very attractive. It doesn't look like those businesses are having success. It doesn't look like a place that a lot of people are going to want to spend time. So that has just kind of compiled upon itself, and now you've got major retailers like Whole Foods and now Nordstrom closing locations. There's not going to be a bounce back for this unless San Francisco gets the situation under control as a city. And there's no indication that that's going to happen because they're a total like big government, total control kind of government there. So you're likely not going to see a return to gun rights or return to property rights or anything like that. So again, they're saying a lot of these businesses are leaving. The mall's owner went on to say that it had expressed serious concerns to city leaders for many years and, quote, urged the city to find solutions to the key issues and lack of enforcement against rampant criminal activity. Nordstrom announced it would expand its presence in California by opening more stores in cities across the state, but they're closing them down in San Francisco. If you want to comment here, you can join us. The number is 603-283-6160. We got Tim in Florida. Tim, you're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead.
Hey, Nordstrom is the kind of store where the cheapest thing you can buy is a throw pillow on clearance for like $30.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a fancier department store, basically.
Yeah, they had a Nordstrom Rack, so the stuff they can't sell at Nordstrom ends up going to Nordstrom Rack, and then they've got one location in Phoenix, Arizona. It's called Last Chance. They've had a lot of fire hazard issues, like where people trample each other over there.
Whoa.
They get designer stuff, for like 90% off.
That's crazy. Any thoughts on what's going on?
Well, what was the name of the guy in Oliver Twist that they used to pay the kids to go and pickpocket?
I don't think I've ever read the book, so I can't tell you.
Not a clue.
That's what it reminded me of. And I just saw the movie. In high school, I think we all read the play. But basically, he paid the orphans. He took care of the orphans, and they go and pickpocket and bring them back.
This probably isn't as compassionate as that sounds, because I suspect the gangsters who are hiring the homeless people aren't taking care of them. They're just giving them a crack rock and sending them along their way. Tim, thanks for the call and the heads up on that tonight. There's more coming up. Free Talk Live.
If you're David, a few well-chosen words can help level the playing field with Goliath. I'm Holland Cook from survivalspeech.com. Recently, I saw a Yellow Pages ad for an appliance repair company, and the headline read, "Why wait for Sears?" If you're going to the Yellow Pages, the Dead Sea Scrolls of advertising, you're ready to buy right now. So this is an attention-grabbing message. And how about the plumber whose radio ad says, "Call by noon Thursday, and we'll be there Saturday at no extra cost"? Smart guy. Most plumbing firms give their crew the weekend off. This one gives them Sunday and Monday off. In the words of a respected advertising executive, cut to the chase, make it quick, and tell me exactly what you can do for me, especially if you're looking for work. For more tips on critical communication skills for the way things are now, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. U.S. President Joe Biden will address the nation later Friday from the Oval Office. He's expected to sign a bipartisan debt ceiling deal into law. On Thursday, the Senate voted to approve the deal with the support of 63 out of 100 senators. FSN's Gabriel Fahmy reports from New York.
The U.S. Congress has voted to cut spending and extend the debt ceiling for 2 years, avoiding a catastrophic default that could have come as soon as Monday. The vote capped off months of melodrama, President Biden tweeting shortly after, "No one gets everything they want in a negotiation, but make no mistake, this bipartisan agreement is a big win for our economy and the American people." Biden brokered the deal with Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy less than a week ago. And despite some resistance from a handful of politicians on both sides of the aisle, it passed swiftly through both the House and the Senate. Gabrielle Fahmy, New York.
An 8-year-old migrant girl who died in U.S. custody last month was denied an ambulance 3 times. That's according to an initial investigation. Anadith Tane Reyes Alvarez, who suffered from a heart condition and a rare blood disorder, died last month inside a Border Patrol station in Harlingen, Texas. FSN's Tony Waterman has more.
Investigators say Reyes Alvarez had about 9 encounters with medical staff while in custody, including seeing a nurse practitioner 4 times on the day she died. She was complaining of nausea and difficulty breathing after a fever of nearly 105 degrees Fahrenheit a few days earlier. After finding her heart rate and oxygen levels to be normal, the nurse denied multiple requests by her family for her to be transferred to a hospital. The report says the nurse also declined to read a pile of documents that belonged to the family, and no one consulted with on-call doctors. Investigators say staff were unaware of the girl's health conditions, although the family had reported it when they were first taken into custody at a different facility. Tony Waterman, Texas.
The U.S. economy added a better-than-expected 339,000 new jobs in May. The latest government data also shows the unemployment rate rose from 3.4% to 3.7%. FSN's Nick Harper reports from Washington.
This is a huge number and smashes expectations, which were in line for about 190,000 new jobs. Of course, all of this as the US Federal Reserve has spent almost a year and a half aggressively raising interest rates to tackle inflation, which should have slowed the jobs market. But this reading now makes it harder for the Fed to pause hikes, as was expected later on this month. With such a large jobs number, further central bank tightening may be ahead. I'm Nick Harper in Washington.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
Is Free Talk Live. Phones are open. And you can join the show. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Joining you here tonight, it's Ian.
And Chris.
So I mentioned at the beginning of the show that there's some unfortunate news surrounding Donald Trump and his campaign for president, which, you know, we're not following these campaigns very closely here on Free Talk Live because what's the point? They're all a bunch of lying scum, so who cares? But there are some people that are out there that, let's say, they begrudgingly support Donald Trump because the old saying is the devil you know, right? And I'm not saying I'm one of these people, okay? For me, I'm all about, as far as in the Republican primary, supporting the Free Stater who's running. That's Aaron Day. And he's actually a principled libertarian who understands the war on drugs is insane and that, drugs need to be legalized, and he's pro-secession.
Nice.
So, yeah, check out Aaron Day if you haven't. Aaron R. Day. He's doing great work. In fact, he just published a book. He sent a copy to the show. I haven't even had a chance to open it yet, so I'm hoping to get a chance to look at it, and then we'll have him on to talk about it. But there's still some people that don't know about Aaron's campaign, and so they're trying to figure out, who do I vote for in the Republican primary? And there's some libertarians that are looking at Donald Trump because of one issue. Not because he's a libertarian, not because he's pretending to be a libertarian. He's not. You know what you got when you got Donald Trump? You got bigger government. You got COVID mandates. You got all kinds of big government stuff. But the one issue that's important to these libertarians is anti-war. And they view Donald Trump, and by the way, Reed Coverdale is a co-host on occasion on Free Talk Live. We haven't had him on in a while because he's been really busy, but and he doesn't live in the area anymore. But he's been posting online about how he's willing to vote for Trump in the primary. And because of this one particular issue of that Trump, during his presidency, was the least warmongering of all of the presidents that we've had in my lifetime, at least. I mean, would you agree with that?
I don't know.
Did he start any new wars?
He didn't, but
he did not. Did he draw down the troops in Afghanistan?
Didn't we have a president in the 90s, where, I don't know, where
no.
we didn't go? No? All right.
No, Bill Clinton was involved in some warmongering stuff, for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Did he draw down troops from Afghanistan? He did.
Yeah.
Yep, he did. Did he have peace talks with Kim Jong-un, the first president in the history of North Korea to ever actually meet with a North Korean president?
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah.
He did. And it didn't go anywhere, ultimately, unfortunately, because of whatever reason, but they did meet on more than one occasion, and there was actual talk about peace between the Koreas, North and South, and largely that was because of Donald Trump. So did he completely end war? No. Did he withdraw the troops from all the military bases? No, of course not. I mean, I'm not saying he's some anti-war guy, but his rhetoric on on conflict internationally has been more peaceful than a lot of the competition has. And even during his campaign this time around, he's had the rhetoric, at least as far as with Ukraine, when he's been asked questions about Ukraine, he wants the conflict to end. He doesn't want to continue funding it. And he got a lot of heat for what he said about that at the CNN town hall just a few weeks ago.
Interesting.
So, I mean, as far as monsters go, he is the devil that you know, and we know what he did the 4 years that he was in. He didn't reduce the government like he made people think that he was going to do. I'm not trying to say he did what he said he was going to do.
He wants to redirect the troops to the border, though.
Well, now that's what I wanted to get into here. And up until whenever this news came out within the last couple days, up until the last couple days, he seemed to be a less warmongering option. But now he's adopting the new hot Republican, perspective, which is that they should go after the drug dealers in Mexico with the U.S. military. Now, before this viewpoint coming out from Trump, he was already bad on the war on drugs, right? So I'm not trying to represent him as in any way libertarian, okay? He already was asking for death penalties for drug dealers, which is not libertarian at all.
Okay? No, definitely not.
Libertarian viewpoint is, look, these drugs may be bad, but people should be free to make choices for themselves, and that includes the choice to put something dangerous into their own bodies. And if you're free to put something dangerous into your own body, you should be free to buy and sell the dangerous thing that these people want to put in their bodies. It's just a free market perspective. Trump's never had that view. Okay, so he's an anti-drug guy, but he, until recently, did not go so far as to say he wanted to actually have a war on drugs dropping bombs in Mexico, an actual hot war, as you might call it, with Mexico. Now, he's not the first Republican to say this, so he's adopting a pretty sort of common, unfortunately, Republican view these days. There's other presidential candidates like the Vivek Ramaswamy guy who's been pimping this for months now, as we pointed out. But it's not just candidates that are doing it. There's actual bill in Congress right now with Republican sponsors that would authorize the U.S. military to go in and do something. And you know what? When you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So when you're the U.S. military, your tool is violence. So presumably they're going to do something violent.
Did you hear
them.
the military was objecting to this?
No.
Yeah, I believe they've come out repeatedly over the, and this is, I don't even think this is recent, but over the decades, saying they don't want to be involved in going after the cartels.
Maybe because they realize it actually might have a blowback problem. Because they feel relatively safe going and dropping bombs in the Middle East because it's kind of hard for those guys to make it back to the United States and blow things up. Obviously, it's happened like 9/11, but it doesn't happen all the time.
Right.
You want to go and start dropping bombs across the Mexican border and see what happens? Because we were talking earlier about how the cartels don't tend to target average people. They go after cartel members. They go after the competing cartels. They're not going around cutting the heads off of tourists. They're not going around cutting the heads off of people and their kids, just random people. That doesn't happen. When somebody gets their head chopped off, it's because they're with the Zetas or they're with the Sandinistas or whoever it is that the different gangs are that are out there right now. Those are the people that are at risk from these activities. But if it's the U.S. military that's going across the border and blowing up cartel buildings, and
this is the quickest way to get the Mexicans supporting the cartels.
Sure. A lot of them already do.
If you start, sure, but even more so than they do now, because now they're going to take up arms against us, as opposed to currently they're not taking. The citizenry isn't taking up arms against us.
You mean the Mexican people aren't?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how many of the Mexican people would do it, but
if they're getting their
cartel.
homes bombs dropped on, sure they will.
And your point there, I think, is that the U.S. military will, despite their best efforts, inevitably bomb the wrong places. They'll inevitably bomb a wedding party or they'll bomb a hospital.
It may not even be the wrong places. It might be their intended target because the Mexican cartels are right next. They're living right next to the ordinary citizenry, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to start bombing, and those bombs are going to explode, and they're going to not only destroy the the safe house or whatever, they're going to destroy who knows how many houses are surrounding.
And now you're going to create Mexican terrorists.
Yep.
Out of that. So maybe what you're saying is the Pentagon is aware of the likelihood of blowback and the easy access of I don't know how many thousands of miles the southern border is, right? Easy access to targets in the United States. Well, Trump doesn't care. According to a report over at RT.com, the Republican presidential frontrunner, Donald Trump, would send U.S. military assets to fight the drug cartels south of the Mexican border. He claimed in a campaign video seen by Fox News on Thursday. Trump outlined a plan to deploy U.S. forces to, quote, inflict maximum damage, unquote, on the criminal networks, adding that he would impose a naval embargo on the cartels while securing the full cooperation of neighboring governments to dismantle regional drug and people smuggling networks. A naval embargo on the cartels. I'm not sure what that is supposed to mean. I mean, I'm sure they're getting...
Sounds like Cuba all over again, where the U.S. surrounded Cuba to stop, the Russians, basically, from, the nukes back in, the late 1960s, was it?
Well, I would think a naval embargo would mean that they're going to do something to try to stop them from getting drug shipments in from South America or something like that.
Yeah, they surround the ports and they won't let the ships in.
The former president promised to lean on Congress to adopt the death penalty for drug dealers and human traffickers while pushing federal authorities to target gangs and organized crime groups responsible for street-level drug trade. Fentanyl would be permanently listed as a federal controlled substance under the second Trump presidency, he continued, warning that China would pay a steep price if it failed to clamp down on selling the chemical precursors used to make the drug. He claimed that he'd had a deal worked out with President Xi in which they weren't going to be sending anymore, and they were going to impose the death penalty on those that made it in China.
He said, when I'm back in the White House, I'll take action on day one to end this horrific plague and save American lives, because the U.S. drug war has all been so successful at saving lives. Trump's going to make it work. He's going to throw more money at the problem and more lives at the problem and more bombs at the problem, and that's going to make drugs go away.
You have to ask yourself, why are they sending fentanyl in the first place?
Because it's making money.
It's because of it's because it's more concentrated, and so it's easier to slip through the border in the first place. That's how we ended up with fentanyl. Because of that. So it's if you if you get rid of the drug war, you don't have that problem anymore. There's not that incentive to concentrate it, which then will reduce the number of overdoses.
And I think you were on the show the night we had Dana Larson on from Canada, the guy that's running the drug testing center up there and selling mushrooms openly. He pointed out, and it was really a great point, and I'd never even heard this point before, essentially that when you legalize a certain drug like cannabis, you actually see the market go towards the less strong versions of it in a lot of different ways. And he gave examples of, being able to have cannabis-laced drinks and things like that. That obviously you can still get strong versions of cannabis, but there's actually a lot of demand out there for very light versions of cannabis that are available. And he gave some really good examples of it. I'm sorry, I'm not particularly familiar with what all of those are. But it's the prohibition that drives drugs to the harder versions, as you pointed out, because when you're smuggling, you've got to be able to get things into a small space, so you got to use the most high potential, high concentration.
For people to understand why this is an issue, it's because it has to do with the cutting process, and basically they're not using high-tech machinery to do it. They're doing this by hand, and it's really hard to cut in doses that won't cause an overdose consistently. It's the lack of consistency when you do it by hand that results in, when you go to dilute it, that results in there being some having not enough and some batches having too much.
Right.
And when you get too much, you overdose.
Yep. So this is more from Trump. He said, under Joe Biden, our hard-won progress has been surrendered, along with the surrender of our southern border. He lamented, blaming the incumbent for, quote, fentanyl and other ultra-deadly poisons stealing more than 100,000 American lives every single year. Quote, in addition to punishing dealers, Trump has proposed increasing federal funds for faith-based counseling and rehab programs for drug addicts, suggested family members of addicts should be able to take leave from work in order to care for their loved ones. Trump is far from the only member of his party to suggest sending the U.S. military to fight drug cartels, an idea that the Mexican president at the moment, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, has staunchly opposed as a violation of Mexican sovereignty. So they're not going to get the Mexican government to go along with this.
Nope, that's why it's going to be a hot war.
Fentanyl seizures at the U.S. southern border more than tripled between 2020 and 2022, and 2023's numbers have already outstripped last year's with 6 months left on the calendar. The number of fentanyl overdose deaths has jumped 94% since 2019, and it remains the leading cause of death among Americans aged 18 to 45. Now, the way it sounds so far, and again, I haven't heard Trump's full speech about this. I would be curious to know exactly what he's saying. He's talking tough, talking about a naval embargo on the cartels and, quote, inflicting maximum damage, unquote. What does that actually mean? Does that mean going in and dropping bombs on Mexican cartel locations? Or is he just talking about a naval embargo, which wouldn't be as severe?
You can't. I think the only way to really look at this seriously is to look at the facts, right? And the facts say Mexico's not going to let us in. If the government won't let us in, their military won't let us in, right? That means we literally have to start bombing Mexican, bases, and the blockade isn't going to be,
blockade's an act of war.
Yeah, it's an act of war, and it's going to be blocking all shipping into and out of Mexican ports.
That's a huge problem. That's a huge problem, not just for the people of Mexico, but a huge problem for the people of the United States.
Right. There is a lot of trade that goes on between the United States and Mexico.
Big time.
They're one of our leading trading partners, actually.
For obvious reasons. They're right there, and they're cheap.
Right. So if you cut Mexico off, that's going to have serious economic consequences on the United States.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is just posturing, honestly.
For sure. It's got to be.
Right, because as you pointed out, the Pentagon doesn't agree with it.
At least you've heard that that's the case. And we know that Trump, in his last 4 years, was talked in and out of things that he had originally wanted to do by his staff at the Pentagon or whatever. So if a general goes to Trump after he gets elected or whatever and says, look, this is a really terrible idea, he's just not gonna do it. He'll just break whatever promises he's been making. This is, I think, ultimately just tough talk, but it's still disturbing. It's still, I think, worthy of being concerned about, and it makes him seem like a less international peace-oriented candidate. Again, not saying he's a peace guy, but just compared to the other monsters out there, he did more peace-oriented stuff during his presidency than many have in the last decades of the United States. So
he did wage economic war on China, though.
With the tariffs, you mean?
Yes.
But that's an economic war against the American people, too.
I would agree.
Yeah. Because who pays for tariffs? The
Me
customer,
and you.
The customer pays.
Yep.
And did Biden roll that back?
Let's see. Biden, no. But Trump actually. Okay, so what happened was, under Trump, it was started as a 10% tariff on goods coming from China into the United States, and it wasn't actually
all goods or electronic goods.
It wasn't just electronic goods. It was a lot of goods. It wasn't all goods, but it was a lot of goods. It was a result. It was about 13%, I believe it was, across the board. If you took Walmart, the biggest quote I have is from Walmart, like CEO, and he said something like 13%. It's going to increase the cost of goods overall on average about 13% across all of Walmart. So. Now, I don't know if that was when it went up to 25% or if it was when it must have been 25% because otherwise I can't imagine it would be more than 10%, right? So it must have been when it was 25%. But basically, Trump introduced it as a 10% tariff on China, and then he raised it to a 25% tariff on China.
Jeez.
And then when Biden came into power, at the end of Trump's presidency, he dropped the tariff altogether.
Really?
When Biden came into power, he immediately reintroduced the 25% tariff. So as far as I know,
so it's still there.
I think it's
it's crazy.
It's not like it's bizarre like the way it's working, because like sometimes it seems like we're paying a 25% tariffs and sometimes it seems like we're not. And I think it might have to do partially with the quantity and the amount of the dollar value of the goods. And there's all these rules associated with it too, like. If you import, like, for example, a whole computer, you don't pay the tariff. If you import the components that make up a computer and then you assemble a computer in the United States, well, you pay a tariff on everything.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So it actually costs. Now, this is supposed to protect American jobs, but in reality, it forces American jobs out of the United States because now you can't.
You got to build the computer outside.
Right. You can't build the computer, in the United States without paying more than your competitors that build it in China.
It's ridiculous. I mean, I'm somebody who builds my own computers, so like this hurts me, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, because you're paying 25% more for those
privilege
parts
of
in
doing
order
it
to
yourself,
put it together yourself,
which takes more time, and why not just pay someone in China to do it?
Yep.
So I got another story here pulled up with regards to the Trump statements. He claims, quote, "When I'm president, we will not rest until we have ended the drug addiction crisis in America. We will win. It will happen. We have to win in 2024 because our country is going to hell." Well, listen, there's nothing you can do with violence to end drug addiction. That's not going to solve the problem. You can go and try bombing Mexico if you want to. I mean, we've already talked about the blowback that's going to happen from that. You're going to create Mexican terrorists. You're going to create all kinds of violence. It's going to be insane. But if they did that, they wouldn't end drug addiction.
No.
They would just drive the price up.
Well, you know what's funny about this too is we've already seen the cartels moving their operations, like growing operations, in at least weed, to the United States. Like they've already started doing it.
Really?
Yeah, and they're using I guess they're using I think it's like Arizona and
legal states.
Yeah, probably, but also like national parks and things like that to grow the drugs. And I don't know why that is. I'm not sure if that's because it's harder to transit or it's just cheaper, like business wise, it's more economical or what. But they've already started doing it, right? Like that's already a major problem that they're facing in the West. So I'm not really sure. I mean, you probably are just going to see more of that than you already do.
Good chance of that. But the thing is, you're never going to end drug addiction until you end it at the source. Because they've always been fighting, just trying to stop drug dealers and trying to stop drug shipments and thinking they can just cut off the supply, which never happened. It only maybe will impact the supply temporarily. This one shipment got caught. Okay, well, the next 10
interestingly, we've heard from ex-military that they actually were protecting the drugs, like when we were in Afghanistan.
Yeah, Silver Dave talks about that.
I mean, this isn't, how is it? And the part of the reason for that, as I understand, had to do with the fact that if you don't allow that, then it completely destroys the economy of the country, and therefore, you end up with more terrorists and more problems.
And you got the stories for years about how the CIA has been protecting drug traffic and actually maybe even bringing the drugs in themselves.
That's how they got their black budget, if I recall correctly, was through the drug trade.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's not going to end.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, to some extent, a lot of this is just show. It's just tough talk to get people's votes, right? We understand that that's what's likely going on here. But if you actually do care, if you out there listening to this show actually care about drug addicts, which is what a lot of this is sort of premised on, right? Oh, well, we need to stop drug addiction. It's a crisis. Well, okay, here's how you do it. And there's no guaranteed way to do it. But the best way to do it is to strike at the root. And I don't mean strike with violence. I mean, you solve the root of the problem, which is people hate their lives.
Yep.
Right? You talk to drug addicts. There's plenty of drug users who aren't addicts, okay? So we need to separate the drug users from the drug abusers. There's two categories there. There's a category of the people who, they just want to smoke a joint at the end of the day or drink some alcohol at the end of the day, crack a beer while they're, watching television at night before they go to sleep and then wake up to go to work the next day. These are productive people. They just have a particular drug they like. Maybe they're weekend warriors. They take, some harder drugs on the weekend or something like that. But by the time they sober up, they're back at work the next week. These are drug users. These are responsible drug users, okay? These people are a lot of times people that end up going to prison because they get caught with their drugs, even though they didn't have a problem with them. Then there's the people that have a problem. There's the drug abusers. There's the people who are using constantly. They're using while they're at work. If they have a job, if they don't have a job, they're
maybe tripping over them on the street.
Right. They've lost their home, or they're just on welfare, so they spend all their money on drugs, and they're completely addicted. They can't take care of their family. They can't take care of themselves. These are the people who are completely messed up in the head. They have no hope. They hate their lives. They may have grown up with drug addicts for parents or abusive parents or whatever, and they just don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. And of course, as economic circumstances continue to spiral down, as inflation continues to rise, as fewer people are able to make ends meet, to get the bills paid, to keep food on the table for their families, you're going to see people falling off the wagon. You're going to see people who have quit doing drugs go back on because they're depressed, they're frustrated, they're angry at their lives, and they want to escape. And until you can solve that problem, and that's not something you can just do in 2 weeks or 2 years or whatever, you have to change serious economic circumstances. We have to actually try freedom in order to give these people the potential at a better life, because things aren't looking bright. More coming up. It's Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live, the show where anyone can call about whatever they want. And we do mean anyone.
I done forgot your name, but we had 9/11, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, well, if they weren't here, could it have happened?
Could what have happened? If who wasn't here? How wasted are you? That's what I want to know.
No, sir. No, I'm not wasted.
Okay.
No, please just listen to me.
Okay.
If the people weren't here that drove the planes into the Twin Towers,
yeah,
right?
They flew them. They didn't drive them, but okay.
No, I'm not saying that. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Because now
wow.
Yeah. I gotta think a minute.
That's all right. We got nothing but time.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
My name is Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which Congressman Ron Paul awarded for having an outstanding freedom website. Write us at fff@fff.org, and we'll send you a free 3-month subscription to our monthly journal of libertarian essays and our booklet, Economic Liberty in the Constitution, which George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams praised in a recent column. That's fff@fff.org.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. U.S. President Joe Biden will address the nation later Friday from the Oval Office. He's expected to sign a bipartisan debt ceiling deal into law. On Thursday, the Senate voted to approve the deal with the support of 63 out of 100 senators. FSN's Gabriel Fahmy reports from New York.
The U.S. Congress has voted to cut spending and extend the debt ceiling for 2 years, avoiding a catastrophic default that could have come as soon as Monday. The vote capped off months of melodrama, President Biden tweeting shortly after, "No one gets everything they want in a negotiation, but make no mistake, this bipartisan agreement is a big win for our economy and the American people." Biden brokered the deal with Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy less than a week ago. And despite some resistance from a handful of politicians on both sides of the aisle, it passed swiftly through both the House and the Senate. Gabrielle Fahmy, New York.
An 8-year-old migrant girl who died in U.S. custody last month was denied an ambulance 3 times. That's according to an initial investigation. Anadith Tane Reyes Alvarez, who suffered from a heart condition and a rare blood disorder, died last month inside a Border Patrol station in Harlingen, Texas. FSN's Tony Waterman has more.
Investigators say Reyes Alvarez had about 9 encounters with medical staff while in custody, including seeing a nurse practitioner 4 times on the day she died. She was complaining of nausea and difficulty breathing after a fever of nearly 105 degrees Fahrenheit a few days earlier. After finding her heart rate and oxygen levels to be normal, the nurse denied multiple requests by her family for her to be transferred to a hospital. The report says the nurse also declined to read a pile of documents that belonged to the family, and no one consulted with on-call doctors. Investigators say staff were unaware of the girl's health conditions, although the family had reported it when they were first taken into custody at a different facility. Tony Waterman, Texas.
The U.S. economy added a better-than-expected 339,000 new jobs in May. The latest government data also shows the unemployment rate rose from 3.4% to 3.7%. FSN's Nick Harper reports from Washington.
This is a huge number and smashes expectations, which were in line for about 190,000 new jobs. Of course, all of this as the US Federal Reserve has spent almost a year and a half aggressively raising interest rates to tackle inflation, which should have slowed the jobs market. But this reading now makes it harder for the Fed to pause hikes, as was expected later on this month. With such a large jobs number, further central bank tightening may be ahead. I'm Nick Harper in Washington.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, what to make of the news that America will not default on its debts. The country's date with economic catastrophe has been averted as a result of a political deal forged at the 11th hour between President Joe Biden and his Republican opponents. David Smith is Washington correspondent for Britain's Guardian newspaper.
It has happened before, most notably about a decade ago when there was a similar standoff and a threat of default. And in fact, one of the credit agencies lowered America's credit rating because of doubts over whether it would pay its bills. This time, in what's a very divided, politically polarized era, Republicans were not just going to lift this debt limit without making some demands to curb spending and impose various conservative priorities. Republicans did get some of what they wanted in terms of the forthcoming budget. Spending is pretty much frozen for the next year, apart from defense. But Joe Biden also managed to protect a lot of his priorities around climate and other things. Perhaps it was inevitable in the end. Even they realized a default would be too catastrophic to contemplate.
And indeed, default would have resulted in economic contagion all over the world. The compromise, though, only gets the country to 2025. You can expect to hear a lot more about America's debt ceiling in 2 years' time. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
The main news again. President Biden prepares to address the nation from the Oval Office after signing a bipartisan debt ceiling deal into law. According to an initial investigation, an 8-year-old migrant girl who died in U.S. custody last month was denied an ambulance 3 times. And some good news for the U.S. economy with a better-than-expected jobs report for May. That is the latest feature story news. Ira Spitzer reporting.
Medical experts announced that an Ebola vaccine is at least 50 white people away from being developed. The CIA is now ready to install a female world leader, and a sex toy is discreetly shipped in a plain dildo-shaped box. Rising to the top of the video news summary game through an unstoppable combination of glad-handing and payoffs, this is the Onion Week in Review. Reflecting on his accomplishments and questioning his current abilities, the Lord God Almighty, our Heavenly Father and Blessed Savior, told reporters that he was no longer confident whether he would be able to create the world in only 7 days. He who commanded light to shine from the darkness admitted that the mere thought of producing the entirety of the universe from nothingness, a task he once completed with time to spare, had become surprisingly daunting, and added that creating a small, lifeless moon or asteroid now seemed like a more realistic goal. In this week's science news, psychology comes to a halt as weary researchers say the mind cannot possibly study itself.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live. It's Free Talk Live. You can join the show, and you can bring up absolutely anything you want. As we kick off the third hour here, the number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Here with you tonight, it's Ian and Chris. We're going to go back to your phone calls and thoughts, but just to bring you up to speed, if you're just tuning in, the most recent topic we were discussing is Donald Trump seems to be signing on board with the escalation of the war on drugs mentality that we're starting to see from more and more Republican candidates out there, which is very disturbing. They're not realizing the failure of this particular government program. You know how the Republicans like to tout themselves as quote unquote small government and quote unquote free market. No, when you ask them about, you're for free markets, aren't you? They'll say, yeah. Well, how about drug legalization? How about we allow a free market in drugs? Oh, we can't do that. Oh, it's dangerous. Somebody might actually get high, and as though that's not happening right now. As though
have you ever gotten high before? Because it's not that dangerous.
Well,
I mean, at least not
depends.
The weed and stuff.
Yeah, that's true. But you know what? Dangerous things happen every day. And one of the most dangerous things you can do is get behind the wheel of a car and drive to work, for instance. So people take risks all the time, and free people should be free to take risks, which is funny because a lot of Republicans understood this during COVID. They understood the idea of you own your own body, at least when it came to the COVID vaccinations. Right? There was plenty of Republicans. We were out protesting with some of them out in front of the governor's house.
The majority of them were Republicans.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I don't know if it was the majority of Republicans, but the majority of the protesters were Republicans, that's for sure. And so, they totally understood your body, your choice when it came to vaccinations, but they don't understand it when it comes to abortion, and they don't understand it when it comes to drug use. So they have no consistency. They have no principles whatsoever. And if you think I'm picking on the Republicans too much, the Democrats are just as bad.
Geez. We pick on the Democrats, I think, more than we pick on the Republicans.
I don't know. I don't know. But there's plenty of drug warrior Democrats too. It's not like the Democrats own ending the drug war. They don't care about ending the drug war.
The problem is that the parties are so similar. They both do a lot of the same stuff. It's like war. They're both warmongers.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Democrats might not be out in your face about it as much, but they
are these days.
Yeah, well,
the Democrats are all about Ukraine, and so now that the Democrats are all about war in Ukraine, now the Republicans are starting to sound like they're anti-war. But you don't have to listen long before you hear them advocating what we're talking about, which is actually starting a new war in Mexico against drug cartels. I mean, this is the most insane idea yet when it comes to the war on drugs. This is absolutely insane, and thankfully you told us earlier, Chris, that apparently the Pentagon has warned against doing this.
Said repeatedly for decades.
Yeah, that they would rather not do something like this because it's an insanely bad idea that's going to have all kinds of blowback and negative consequences. Let's go to the phone. So we got Ricky on the line in Pennsylvania. You're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead, Ricky.
Thank you there, brother. Ian, is that brother Chris is with you there?
It is.
All right, brother. Well, I got serious issues with the Donald J. Trump. The J stands for jackass, no doubt. Now, I hope the Donald's listening to Ricky from the Commonwealth. I'm going to tell him a few things. I've been a chronic caller on this show for years. I've been smoking weed since I was 15. But I'll say this. Between 2015 and 2016, my thing was crystal. And I was using crystal. Really? 2 lines a day, maybe every other day or so. I was flying when I called in this show. Now in 2017's even better. That was my best year as a Confederate Democrat. I called in. I deliberately was high every single call on cannabis.
Damn.
Now, that being said, you see, the problem here is Big Pharma's drugs. We have 8% of the world population. We use 80% of the drugs, namely antidepressants, antipsychotics, and opiates. Now, on to fentanyl. 14 years ago, I talked to junkies who were taking a needle, sticking it into a 100-milligram fentanyl patch, and injecting it. Now, the Donald don't seem to have a problem with that. But not only weed, but at least quality product when it comes to crystal are both much safer than them. Now, I don't want to sound like a hypocrite, because I drink alcohol. I like my Rolling Rocks and my bourbon. But you know what? Alcohol, I'm not even talking heavy abuse. I'm talking a little more than moderate. You're getting drunk regularly. All it does is deaden brain cells temporarily. That's it. That's how alcohol
I don't know if it's
works.
Temporary, man. I mean, I've seen some long time.
You know what happens is, over time with alcohol, it'll deaden those same brain cells over and over again, and they won't regenerate. That's what happens.
Yeah, you see some older people that you can tell they have drank way too much for way too long, and there ain't no coming back.
Well, they get that bloated thing going, too. You know?
They get the red face, too. You can always tell.
I've had it. I've had it with the Donald. He's going to execute people. Now, once he starts executing drug dealers, how long is it going to take before he starts executing people that are responsible, enjoy quality weed and quality crystal for using that?
I don't think he would go that far. I mean, because
he's going to publicly execute drug dealers.
Well, it's tough talk.
Not much of a stretch.
It's tough talk, Ricky.
It sounds like he's.
Well, he seems to have a personal issue with this. I mean, doesn't he remember the war on drugs with Nancy Reagan?
Sure.
There's no war on drugs. I thought that used to be his big role model. Has he forgotten that?
You know what he wants to do is turn this country into a Christian Saudi Arabia.
Oh, God. I was talking about the Christian nationalism before. Screw this. People have the right to either be a Christian or not. That's the way constitutionality works. It works both ways, Donald.
When you say Christian Saudi Arabia, Chris, you mean high restriction as far as chemical substances. I
believe that Saudi Arabia executes drug dealers.
I think you're right.
I'm sorry, anybody who
You get caught with drugs, you're in trouble.
With drugs, yeah.
I don't know if you'll get executed, but you'll be in big trouble, right?
I think they execute anybody coming in with drugs, at least at a minimum. Yeah. So.
Wow. Ricky, any other comments on that? Go ahead.
Well, one thing to anybody listening to Free Talk Live.
And it hasn't stopped drugs going into Saudi Arabia either, by the way. Well, just to clarify that.
Just check out the archives all throughout 2017, every night. I called in. I was on quality, a little Jamaican red, little purple haze, nice and green. High every single time. That was my best year.
Thanks for the call tonight, Ricky. I appreciate it. Let's talk to Sarah in New Mexico. You're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead, Sarah.
I wonder, what's the point of the call? Did he have a purpose? So most of these callers, they just ramble on.
Well, Ricky is a bit of a rambler, that is true, but I think that the purpose of his call was to lambaste Donald Trump for his anti-war or his pro-war on drugs position, and which makes me wonder about you.
Yeah, I was thinking the same
Sarah.
thing. That's a really funny statement coming from you.
Yeah, Sarah, what do you think about this? You've been advocating crackdowns on drugs before, right? Like you want to take cigarettes out. You want to prohibit people from smoking at bus stops and things like that. You seem to be in favor of the war on drugs. Is that right?
Actually, the more I think about it, I'm in favor of those drug homes since they explained it. Mm-hmm. Remember, I was in favor of it where you do, and then they monitor you. So if you almost die, they rescue you. So I'm kind of in favor of it, but
Are you talking about when you say a drug home, are you talking about like a recovery place where people live and they're monitored? Is that the idea?
No, like in Europe, they have a place to do drugs, and then if it gets out of hand, they'll rescue you.
You mean like an injection site, a safe injection
site?
something like
that. And I kind of am in supportive of that since I heard their argument. But
really, okay, well that's good news, Sarah. I'm glad to hear that you've changed your position on this. So do you think
I just go back and forth?
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay, but just to be clear,
a little bit of execution, a little bit of rehab, mix the two together. You switch them up every once in a while.
So let me make sure
maybe kill some of the rehabbers.
Let me make sure I'm following you here, Sarah. You think there could be?
I do. I don't know about being this whole war against the drug part of it, but I think that there should be a knowledge that it should be discouraged that the drugs are harmful. And that's why I'm in support of the alcohol drug rehab programs.
Do you use any drugs personally, Sarah?
Do you ever take Advil?
No, I don't
Tylenol?
take any of that stuff.
How about alcohol?
No, because I drink a little bit here. I don't even
so you're a hard drug. She's a hard drug user, Chris. She drinks alcohol. Now, when you say you drink a little,
I don't drink any of it. I
thought you said a little bit.
I thought that was good, and I don't even drink any of it. I don't drink any alcohol.
So you used to drink alcohol, but you've quit drinking alcohol?
I drink a little bit here and there, but it wasn't. I just never had.
I just want to see what I'm clarifying here. You drink a little bit here and there, or you have drunk previously?
Just with meals in here.
When was the last time you had an alcoholic beverage?
Just maybe a sip, maybe about 5 months ago.
Just a sip?
A sip. Who drinks a sip of alcohol, of any kind of alcohol? Like if you said a shot, okay.
Yeah.
But a sip?
One sip. Mm-hmm. You sure you didn't drink the whole bottle?
I was calling about today the
By the way, good for you, Sarah. If it's true that you've actually quit drinking alcohol, that's good for you. I'm glad to hear it. I quit back in 2021, I think it was. So yeah, I'm with you.
I never was a drinker. I never just had a sip here and there, but I didn't do nothing for me.
Okay, all right. What else?
Yeah, well, you might need a little bit more than a sip if you want to do something for you.
All right, what else you got, Sarah?
So, Bernalillo County Commission got 2 electric cars. They got 2 electric cars, and now they're encouraging the workers to ride buses and ride bicycles back and forth to work. This is one of the things they want you to do to save fuel. You know what I mean? So
they're encouraging, just to clarify, you're saying they're encouraging county workers, the county government employees, to take a bus?
That's great. They're encouraging them since they got these two all electric cars for the county commission. Now they're encouraging employees to take the bus.
So the
and
county
ride a bike
commissioners
back and
get
forth.
the electric car to drive around, but the other employees have to take the bus?
Well, it's an encouragement.
What are they
want them
doing?
to
How
do
are they
what I'm
encouraging
doing.
them? Are they incentivizing it
Well,
somehow?
I mean, no, it was announced. It was announced in the news.
So they're not like going to give them a bonus or something like that, or somehow incentivize them to take the bus. They're
Maybe
just
pay
saying
for their bus ticket.
They're just saying, "Hey, you guys, we think you should take the bus."
I don't know what the incentive is. I wonder if they're going to get a gift
Right, because
card
there's not
to
much of an incentive to
grocery-
take a bus on its own. I mean, it's generally an unpleasant experience for a lot of people. So, like, you'd have to.
I think that's a really good the incentive, like you said. If they do ride a bus back and forth, that they would give them $5 a day or something to their paycheck. You know what I mean? If they could prove that they did, I mean, that's going to be the difficult part.
Why
But
don't you just buy the
on your
bus
good
ticket or
conscience.
something?
How often do the buses come along in Albuquerque? Is it like every 5 minutes, every 15 minutes? What's the frequency?
Monday through Friday, it's pretty good. You know, it's okay. Unless they don't have a bus driver or they don't show, they just skip an hour. They're short of bus drivers.
But you
They
didn't
just
answer
show
my
up like an
question.
hour later.
How often is it? Is it once an hour? Once every 15 minutes? I mean, you take the bus. Don't you know?
It's like Monday through every 30 minutes, depending on what route. Central and San Mateo, you get more buses, but the other routes you get every 30 minutes.
Every 30 minutes. All right. That's not very frequent. I mean, it's kind of inconvenient, right?
It can become really inconvenient if you have to transfer too. I haven't done a whole lot of bus riding, but I was in San Diego, and yeah, I mean, it'd take you an hour to get across San Diego.
Well, I mean, it might take you an hour to get across San Diego anyway, right? Is the traffic really good there?
No, it's pretty bad. But even like that's probably like it's worse.
It'll be worse.
Yeah,
on the
it'll
bus,
be way worse
because you're stopping constantly.
Yeah. It's yeah. I mean, if you think about taking 40 minutes, it takes you 2 hours.
Thank you, Sarah, for the call tonight. Let's go on to Cynthia. She's in California. Cynthia, you're on Free Talk Live with Ian and Chris.
Yeah, I'm actually in San Francisco.
I'm sorry to hear about that. How are things in San Francisco?
Well, mostly the street people are friendly and courteous, and a few are totally out of control, and we have trouble getting the police to pick them up timely and do something about it.
Now, do you live in downtown San Francisco, or what part of San Francisco are you in?
Oh, I'm in the Polk Gulch area. That's not Lower Nob Hill.
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with the geography. Is that considered to be a good area of town or not so much?
Yes, but frankly, there's a lot of unhoused people up here too.
Really?
And a lot of screaming and yelling at night, but not a lot of violence. So, but I'm a retired physician, and I used to own a minor emergency, so I'm used to dealing with people who come in with pain problems. And I want to explain that the federal government has handicapped Trump in the sense that they have consistently suppressed useful information and substances that physicians could have been using. For example, the feds made ibogaine illegal. You know about ibogaine?
Oh, yeah, we've heard a lot about it. Ibogaine is the psychedelic substance, right?
Right. It takes about 2 or 3 days, and then they get about 6 months that they're free of a desire to take narcotics.
Yeah, it's a very powerful medicine, but I mean, Trump isn't advocating to legalize that. He's talking about increasing the war on drugs.
If they had legalized it, if they hadn't made it illegal, then physicians would have gotten skilled at using it, and we'd have probably far fewer addicted people.
I don't disagree with you on that. I'm not sure what that has to do with Donald Trump, though. I mean, he's the one talking about increasing the war on drugs.
That's because he may have seen no other options but military action.
That's ridiculous because
how about just legalizing what you're talking about?
The option is to end the violence and to legalize the drugs, and then you solve almost all of the problems literally within nights, within days,
with the stroke of a pen.
I see this situation from a physician's perspective, which is that you take away their narcotics, and they're going to be in a great deal of pain.
Yeah, sure.
A great deal of pain. And
then they'll end up on another drug.
And we can use kratom right?
Mm-hmm.
Kratom to help break that addiction. And the feds tried to make that illegal a few years ago. And there was a huge pushback, and they had to back off.
I mean, you've talked about the people that are in the streets there in San Francisco. I mean, these are people that are using illegal drugs, right?
Right.
Yeah, and they got all the illegal drugs they need to get, and they get high, and they get in some cases in your way, and they get dangerous, and they or they're peeing in the streets or dropping a deuce here and there or whatever, and it's pretty gross, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so the way you solve that problem is not by making drugs more illegal. Is you end the war on drugs so they can get cheaper, and then more people can afford the drugs, and then they get better drugs.
I think on the prior show, somebody mentioned the fact that you could actually give them morphine, and it would be cheaper and safer to have that administered.
Yeah, if it was legal, to do that, but unfortunately it's not.
Right. So that's how I'm saying Trump has been handicapped by all the.
Trump isn't handicapped. He's out there calling for more arrests. He's calling for more crackdown and the death penalty for somebody who sells some morphine.
Right. He's upping the ante because these other options have been withheld.
Are you acting like Trump has never heard of drug legalization?
Well, he may never have heard of it in a positive manner.
I mean, maybe, I guess. I mean, the odds that he could get to age 74 as a politician who goes to campaign stops and talks to a bunch of people, he's never heard of the idea of legalizing drugs.
That's hard to believe.
I don't buy it.
It's in the newspaper. It's not like this is something that's secret.
Think about all the bad advice he got from the nation's leaders regarding COVID and vaccinations. Think of all that bullshit.
Okay, you can't say that on the radio, Cynthia. I understand that it's frustrating to you, and I will let you have a second crack here. I just need to make sure our dump machine is all set. So, look, you can't say that on broadcast radio, okay?
I didn't know that was considered a forbidden word.
Yeah, so just be careful. But I just... You're saying here, you're one of these people, it sounds like, that just makes excuses for Donald Trump, as though he's just this dummy who is constantly being manipulated by the people around him, the very people that he claimed he was going to D.C. to drain the swamp of, and then didn't.
I'm just speaking from a common sense approach to how I would have done it when I was in practice. There's all kinds of additional information. For example, Roundup is now shown to affect the brain in mammals, causing
Roundup,
them
the weed
to be
killer?
at risk for addictions.
The weed killer? Roundup?
Yes. And it's in all the grain products. It's in the rice. It's in, you name it. They've been loading it with that. And what it does is it sets up their brain for addiction. So maybe they need to take that stuff off the market, because one thing addicts do is they load up on sweet pastries. And between the sugar, which has Roundup in it, and the wheat flour, which has Roundup in it, and the wheat itself.
See, here's the thing, Cynthia. Here you are calling to make another prohibition. You're saying we can help the addicts by prohibiting this other product. And I understand the critiques of Roundup. I get it.
It should never have been approved. It should never have been approved in the first place.
Well, that's the thing.
It's a synthetic compound, and it damages the brain.
Look, hey, I get the critiques of Roundup. I understand Monsanto, bad news, big corporate mega food or whatever. I understand all the critiques, but I do not support violence as the solution. And when you say something should be banned, you are saying that someone should be threatened with violence if they do a thing, right? That's what you're talking about.
Well, I'm saying that they should never have licensed them to produce that substance.
So that's another way of saying if someone were to produce the substance without a license, then somebody would do violence against them, right?
I'm saying no farmer would use it if they knew that people would boycott their products.
Well, now that would be
that might be a good solution to the problem. Then why don't you start a boycott of the products?
Because we only found out just several years ago that without our knowledge, they started applying it to the wheat crops. It was never approved for the wheat crops, but they started applying it as a method of causing the grain to mature faster and give them a few more pennies of profit, supposedly.
Yeah.
But can you hear me?
We hear you fine. But what you pointed out here is a market-based solution, which is a boycott and an awareness campaign, advertising, letting people know
a thing that you think is a bad idea, that's a much better idea than going and using the guns of government and the violence of the state to try to construct rules that are just mandates that are going to be backed with violence to try to sculpt society in the way that you want. Thank you for the call tonight, Cynthia. I do appreciate it. The number here, if you want to join the show, it's 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. We got plenty of time for you if you want to join us. Coming up, we talked about Chicago, we talked about California, and now New York City is the latest nightmare. In this case, it's an attack against Airbnb and people who just want to rent a room in their house temporarily. We'll talk about it coming up. It's Free Talk Live.
I've been told no in many different ways.
I give you an order and you're going to obey it.
George, you can go this way.
You can do that and you have to leave here.
You cannot bring Simon to the rally.
Walk with me. Well, I'm comfortable here, actually. Whoa. Hey. Who do you think you are? Excuse me.
There is no video and audio allowed in this office.
No, I have work today.
You ain't gonna make it.
Wait a minute.
Whoa.
Hey! Oh my God! Unbelievable!
Why are you running from me?
Because you're scared me. What am I being detained for?
You're being served.
What is this?
You're being served.
What is this? Bureaucrats have a funny way of telling people no.
That's the sound of the men working on the chain.
Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree. Watch it for free and order the Director's Cut DVD at victimlesscrimespree.com.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. U.S. President Joe Biden will address the nation later Friday from the Oval Office. He's expected to sign a bipartisan debt ceiling deal into law. On Thursday, the Senate voted to approve the deal with the support of 63 out of 100 senators. FSN's Gabriel Fahmy reports from New York.
The U.S. Congress has voted to cut spending and extend the debt ceiling for 2 years, avoiding a catastrophic default that could have come as soon as Monday. The vote capped off months of melodrama, President Biden tweeting shortly after, "No one gets everything they want in a negotiation, but make no mistake, this bipartisan agreement is a big win for our economy and the American people." Biden brokered the deal with Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy less than a week ago. And despite some resistance from a handful of politicians on both sides of the aisle, it passed swiftly through both the House and the Senate. Gabrielle Fahmy, New York.
An 8-year-old migrant girl who died in U.S. custody last month was denied an ambulance 3 times. That's according to an initial investigation. Anadith Tane Reyes Alvarez, who suffered from a heart condition and a rare blood disorder, died last month inside a Border Patrol station in Harlingen, Texas. FSN's Tony Waterman has more.
Investigators say Reyes Alvarez had about 9 encounters with medical staff while in custody, including seeing a nurse practitioner 4 times on the day she died. She was complaining of nausea and difficulty breathing after a fever of nearly 105 degrees Fahrenheit a few days earlier. After finding her heart rate and oxygen levels to be normal, the nurse denied multiple requests by her family for her to be transferred to a hospital. The report says the nurse also declined to read a pile of documents that belonged to the family, and no one consulted with on-call doctors. Investigators say staff were unaware of the girl's health conditions, although the family had reported it when they were first taken into custody at a different facility. Tony Waterman, Texas.
The U.S. economy added a better-than-expected 339,000 new jobs in May. The latest government data also shows the unemployment rate rose from 3.4% to 3.7%. FSN's Nick Harper reports from Washington.
This is a huge number and smashes expectations, which were in line for about 190,000 new jobs. Of course, all of this as the US Federal Reserve has spent almost a year and a half aggressively raising interest rates to tackle inflation, which should have slowed the jobs market. But this reading now makes it harder for the Fed to pause hikes, as was expected later on this month. With such a large jobs number, further central bank tightening may be ahead. I'm Nick Harper in Washington.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
open if you want to join the show. Number 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Join us online. Head over to freetalklive.com and enjoy the features we have waiting for you there. All of them are for free. Archives going back for many years. Different social media options like social.freetalklive.com. That is our Mastodon system, which was recently updated to version 4. Whatever it is. It wasn't version 3, and now it's version 4. I don't know what they changed. Still looks like Mastodon to me. Maybe they fixed some bugs.
A lot of wanted features, though, apparently.
Perhaps. But yeah, people were asking for that, so we got that done. You can go check that out over at social.freetalklive.com. It's a way to get interactive with other Free Talk Live listeners, people that appreciate decentralization and more freedom to express yourself, because you still don't have that on the centralized platforms. We give a lot more freedom of expression over at social.freetalklive.com. So be sure you get over there and get interactive. Also, I want to say thanks to Kat Cooper, who is a Free Talk Live supporter of our AMPS program. Kat is a silver level supporter, meaning that Kat is doing $5 a month to the AMPS program. AMPS stands for Advertise, Market, Promote, and Support. It's a way to get behind what we do here on Free Talk Live to help introduce more people to the ideas of freedom on more great radio stations all around the country. If you appreciate the work that we do, you can join Kat over there at amps.freetalklive.com for as little as $5 a month, and you can help us with our mission here. That's amps.freetalklive.com. You know, since we're talking about the war on drugs, Chris, and we just had somebody who said she was a doctor previously on the show talking about the insane drug war policies out there, I had an update on a story. I don't know if you were on this show, Chris, but it's been some months, I think, since we covered the story. It was about ketamine.
Don't know that it was.
Yeah, so the story was about this doctor in South Carolina who had built a nationwide practice. This story from the Washington Post. This is an update. Built a nationwide practice prescribing ketamine for patients to use at home. Notified recently that he's been told he has to stop. Now, what these patients were using this for was things like PTSD, severe depression, major like psychological kind of issues. And they were finding that the ketamine was very, very helpful to them in this particular form of treatment. But ketamine is also a scheduled narcotic substance with the DEA. And so while it's not, I don't think, on Schedule 1, it is on the drug schedule. I'm not familiar with exactly which location it is, but it's prohibited, right? Like, you're not allowed to just have ketamine. But you can have it under the certain controlled circumstances prescribed by a doctor. But what had happened with this guy, and they probably get into it, is he was, during COVID, able to expand his practice due to telemedicine. I don't know if you're familiar with the telemedicine thing.
Is this that guy? Maybe we did. I may have been on the show when we covered this.
I would think we might have, because I like to hold drug issues for nobody nights when nobody's with us here on Free Talk Live. And now they're after him. Federal DEA contacted him. He says, his name is Scott Smith. He's from Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. He emailed his patients the very same day when he got the notice saying, quote, "My privileges to prescribe controlled substances have been suspended until further notice. Practice has been closed immediately per DEA instruction." According to several messages reviewed by the Washington Post, he wrote in an email, quote, "I'm quite a bit of shock about this." Because this guy, he's not a drug dealer. He's not like some...
I mean, but... okay. This doesn't surprise me, right? Like, this is typical government, you know?
Right.
Somebody is actually being successful at doing something.
At helping people?
Yeah. Oh, no. We can't have that. We got to shut that down.
Yep, that's exactly.
We need those, users to be addicted to heroin and all sorts of other, substances, so that we can throw them in jail, so that the prison industrial complex can make $1, and the law enforcement, and the sheriff organization, can pocket more money in and say, we need more law enforcement, and we need more law enforcement tools, and
so we can go after doctors.
Yeah.
Right.
So you have to after the people who are actually potentially able to help you.
Yes, and he had been helping people, and he had a process in place to make sure that he wasn't just dealing with drug addicts that were looking for the ketamine. He had a system that would ferret those people out, and he was very successful in making sure that he's dealing with really needy people who actually are looking for help with their serious mental problems. And he's a longtime physician. He was the subject of a Washington Post story in 2022. He obtained licenses to practice medicine in almost every U.S. state, capitalizing on pandemic-era telehealth flexibilities that enabled him to prescribe ketamine nationally. Smith tapped into a deep well of need from patients looking for an alternative to antidepressants, emerging as an evangelist for prescribing ketamine to treat anxiety and depression, even though the drug hadn't been approved by the FDA for that purpose. Several of his patients had credited ketamine with saving their lives.
And something to point out is that this is not that unusual to prescribe drugs off. I'm trying to think what they call it. Off,
whatever the intention is. Yeah.
Yeah. Off.
Purpose?
Off. Yeah.
There's probably some.
There's
term,
a specific term I'm trying to think of, but it's basically
off-label.
Off-label. That's
Okay.
probably it. But off-label. So it's and it's not. And that's the thing.
Is it a gray area or something?
It's not a gray area. No? It's just that they when they do these the drug testing, it's for a particular thing, right? But it may be that for a great example of this might be like something like balding, right? I think that originally that was for like the heart or something.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And
where
then
they're experimenting with something for one reason, but they find out it doesn't.
But they found out that it helps with hair growing hair.
Right.
And so a doctor might have prescribed that for hair growth as opposed to what it was originally tested for.
And that's within their ability to do.
Something along those lines. Yeah. I don't know how much there may be like some limits on how much they can do it or something like that. But yeah, they can.
You have to wonder whether the Washington Post feature story about this guy ended up sinking him because he got this
for
media.
Sure. I'm sure it did.
And it brought him attention.
I've actually been off on I've been on a drug. I can't remember what the drug was, but it was off-label. So yeah, they can definitely do it.
Smith's work and that of other at-home ketamine providers have been controversial among academics and psychiatrists who've questioned the wisdom of dispensing ketamine, a tightly regulated drug with a history of recreational abuse, to patients outside the direct supervision of a healthcare professional. Smith didn't respond to messages seeking comment recently. The Drug Enforcement Administration also didn't provide comment. Dylan Savage, 28-year-old industrial equipment executive in New York, said he had his follow-up appointment with Smith's office Tuesday morning when he renewed his prescription for ketamine tablets, but barely an hour after Smith sent his notice to patients, the pharmacy said it would refund Savage rather than fill his prescription.
Ooh.
He spent most of the night searching Reddit for other ketamine providers, he said, and is worried that Smith shutting down will put suicidal patients at risk. He said, quote, DEA is going to have blood on their hands for pulling out the rug so abruptly. Well, DEA's got a lot of blood on their hands, so I'm sure they won't even notice. Word of Smith's closure came the same day the DEA extended the ability to prescribe controlled substances by telehealth for 6 months, as it works to craft new regulations on prescribing those drugs virtually. The ability to prescribe these medications without seeing patients in person was introduced during the pandemic and transformed the way many patients receive drugs, from Adderall to opioid addiction drug buprenorphine. Buprenorphine? Anyway, ketamine in recent years has emerged as a promising treatment for people with severe depression, and a derivative of the compound has been approved by the FDA to treat depression under strict guidelines. Many patients, however, have their first experience through an off-label use of the drug. That's the term. Such as clinics that administer generic ketamine by infusion through an IV. Smith and a growing number of startups have brought ketamine into patient homes by prescribing it in the form of lozenges that dissolve under the tongue and can be obtained from compounding pharmacies. And this is something that we learned about in the original story. Was this is a more affordable way for these patients to get the drug that works for them, ketamine, by getting them through the mail in lozenge form. They can take them at home. The other way that they avoid by going through doctors like this is they have to go into this clinic and get an IV injection of this stuff. Yeah. I mean, that's a huge invasive kind of way to take a drug, and it's apparently also very, very expensive because you're paying for the doctor's, clinic time and whatever, the IV and the nurses and all these costs, right? Now you can just get the lozenge and then take it under the tongue and you're good to go. But now they're telling this doctor that he can no longer prescribe the drug. He had said previously that he had treated as many as 3,000 patients with ketamine, that more than half of them benefited, and only 2 of them were looking to abuse the drug. In interviews, Smith was candid about the limitations of his virtual practice and how seriously he took the risk of misusing it. He said, quote, "I can have my medical license taken away, I can be fined, I can do jail time for continuing to treat people," he said, people who are abusing ketamine, that is. Still, he described his practice as a calling to help people in need. He said, "I'm like a medic running around on the battlefield taking care of wounded people, and ketamine helps the people I'm taking care of." So you got to give the guy a lot of credit. He was working in a high-risk area of medicine, right? Some doctors, they just won't even touch this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
They don't want the risk of DEA coming in, raiding their clinic, or shutting down their business, possibly even arresting them. So this guy was definitely like taking some level of risk, even though he was doing it legally by all evidence. But now they're telling him he can't do it anymore. And, of course, they're not commenting about it. So, like, what do you do about this? Do you sue the DEA for...
the disgusting thing is that there are authorities out there who are dictating to doctors how they're supposed to do medicine,
yeah,
right?
Government bureaucrats.
That's not how it should work.
Patients such as Julie Miner Hackworth are now struggling to find a way to continue her therapy. She says, "I was starting to experience positive, happy, joyful feelings, and now that has just been taken away." She's a 51-year-old woman living in Kentucky. She said ketamine was, quote, "profoundly better for her than antidepressants," describing the effect as, quote, "immediate and obvious." And this, of course, is the reason why these drugs are not allowed. This is the reason why mushrooms, MDMA, ketamine, LSD, a lot of these drugs that are on the prohibited list are prohibited because they can actually have an immediate and profound effect. That's the word she used. Profoundly better, immediate and obvious. These are effective drugs for the people who need them for various different problems. And they're more effective than the legal route. But that's bad for the pharmaceutical companies.
Mm-hmm.
That's a threat to the medical status quo. And so Pfizer or the other pharmaceutical manufacturers out there, these big mega corporations, they don't want to see these drugs turned legal because it will impact their ability to sell someone antidepressants to take for the rest of their lives.
There's they've got patents, and they use those patents to make money
big time.
And if they allowed these other drugs that were natural, or at least were not patented, you wouldn't need these harsher drugs.
Even though they could sell those drugs, right? Like if ketamine were more legal, right? If it weren't controlled, it is quote unquote legal under certain circumstances. But if it weren't heavily controlled as it is, then there could be ketamine at any pharmacy, at any Walgreens or whatever, and there's no reason why Merck or Pfizer or whoever couldn't manufacture ketamine and sell ketamine under whatever brand name
but
they
it
wanted
would be it would be equivalent to them becoming a generic, which means they wouldn't be able to charge as much.
They wouldn't be able to charge as much, and if it's as effective as these people say it is, that means people can cure their problem. Now, I'm not saying everybody can, but we know that there are people who have had such profound impacts by these illegal drugs that they've actually done things like cured their PTSD. And that's not what they really want. They want you to be on their drug for the rest of your life. They want you to be a lifetime customer taking their antidepressants every single day and paying them until you die. And that's not as it's not as profitable if you just go and buy, half a year's worth of whatever treatments, and then you take the treatments with a psychologist or something like that. You work out your problems. You address the root cause of the depression, that whatever it is that happened to you, or the things that you're obsessing over, or whatever it is that is causing your depression. You make that, you address that, you deal with it, and then it goes away, and you can actually live a happy life without having to constantly adjust the chemical balance in your body with these drugs. That's why they don't want these things to be legal. Not only is it not profitable in the immediate term, it's not profitable in the long term for them either. Let's go to the phones here. We got Joe in Maryland. You're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead, Joe. Joe in Maryland. Going once. Joe in Maryland going twice. All right. Thank you for the try. Appreciate it. The number here is 603-283-6160. So a little bit more from this story. Adam Pruitt is a psychiatrist in Vermont. He's one of the few ketamine providers with Smith's national reach. He said he'd heard from well over 100 of Smith's patients since Tuesday afternoon and was trying to address the demand. He said it's exceeded my capacity to respond to. Many patients gravitated to Smith for his business model, where they would generally pay $250 a month for a consultation and a supply of ketamine, plus whatever the compounding pharmacy charged for the lozenges. That's far more affordable, said patients, than IV infusions that can run several $100s per treatment.
Wow.
As well as packages that include coaching and therapy offered by at-home ketamine companies. It's not what I need, said another Smith patient, a researcher in Maryland, who spoke on the condition of anonymity because he's worried of the stigma associated with ketamine could complicate his ability to get a security clearance. Says, I need a routine of every 3 days, a dose that he would take under Smith's supervision. Another man said, he's the executive in New York, said, everyone else seemed like a money grab. Dr. Smith never once struck me as a money grab, said the man in New York. He said he's hopeful he can find a general practitioner to prescribe ketamine, pointing out that it is classified by the DEA as less prone to abuse than Adderall. Quote, this is a medication that any doctor with a DEA license could prescribe. They don't, because most of the medical community is ignorant and fearful of it. And if they're not ignorant and fearful of ketamine itself, they're certainly fearful legitimately of the DEA. Because if the DEA decides that you are prescribing too much ketamine, or you've given this customer over here more than you should have,
or too many, I think what it really comes down to is if you are prescribing it to too many of your customers, right? And that actually makes a lot of sense that you would be prescribing it to a lot of customers if that's your niche. If you're right, if that's your exactly.
If it's working,
right? If that's what your specialty is.
Right. So if you make this product your specialty, you basically get on the bad side of the DEA.
It doesn't even necessarily have to be your specialty, right? It's these particular conditions that this medication treats that you would be specializing in.
And this is effective.
That's why you,
It's a sad update. I'm sorry to hear this about Dr. Smith there in South Carolina. I hope he can do something. I hope he can countersue them.
Not likely.
It doesn't sound like there's any real reason that this has happened to them. Just, he sold ketamine. People were happy. We can't have that. We can't have people being happy who are depressed. They need to be on permanent medication from Pfizer or some other drug corporation for the rest of their lives. I mean, the DEA needs to just disappear. They need to go away entirely. They do absolutely nothing of value. They destroy peaceful people's lives. They're destroying this man's business. Okay, I mean he's still presumably a doctor. So he could probably go do other doctoring things, but this was what he was focusing on. They took away his business from him. That's not to say he can't come back from this or that he's going to be in the poorhouse or anything like that. I suspect he'll be all right, but it's not okay what these people have done to him.
Probably have to go back to general practice.
Yeah, or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's not okay what they're doing. And this is, of course, an intimidation tactic as well, because every other doctor in the country that has prescribed ketamine, again, a lot of them just stay away from it because they don't want to get into these circumstances. Every other doctor, they're going to hear through the industry, through friends or whatever, they're going to hear about what happened to him, and they're going to think twice now. Like, okay, do I really need to be doing this? I got a family. I got to put my kids through college. I mean, I like helping my patients, but I don't want to go to prison. Right? So, I mean, there's probably going to be some other doctors that will slow down and or stop their prescribing of this simply because they don't want to be the next target. So it's really unfortunate. The DEA is getting in the way of people being helped, people who are having a better life now, spiraling back down into whatever depression that they were having before. If you want to comment on this, you're welcome to join us. The number here is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. And again, this is something else that independents could solve.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Instantly.
Yeah.
We would be out from under the thumb of the DEA when New Hampshire, or if your state secedes, when you secede, no more DEA.
Yeah, the New Hampshire law is basically based on the federal list.
That's right. Yeah, the New Hampshire drug prohibition.
By going independent, that would be strucken from.
It would literally be the same day.
Yeah,
like the war on drugs in New Hampshire would be over the moment we seceded from the United States. Let's go to the phones here. Caller, you're on Free Talk Live with Ian and Chris. Go ahead.
Hey, this is Rusty from Portland.
Rusty, what's on your mind?
Have you heard about the Halt Fentanyl Act?
No, tell me about it.
Well, the Democrats and Republicans are finally working together. But
oh boy, it's going to be bad.
It's because Biden, who campaigned on ending mandatory minimums, he's like, I've reformed my ways since I was a drug warrior. Now he wants to institute new mandatory minimums for all fentanyl-related substances. Like,
gross.
Even if it's an analog, like, designed to reverse fentanyl overdoses, that would apply to that, too.
The crazy thing about that, too, is these people, they don't even know they're on fentanyl.
No, Some people do. Some people take it on purpose.
Okay.
Well, if you have
but there's
10 grams of substance even related to fentanyl, they want to give you 5 years. So if it even has a little bit in it, you're effed.
Yeah, all I know is that, my understanding is that they're lacing other drugs with it, and they're not even giving you what you think you're getting now because, well, it's really just fentanyl.
Yeah, the Halt Fentanyl Act, according to AugustaFreePress.com, would schedule all current and future fentanyl analogs as Schedule I drugs, which would put them at the level of heroin and marijuana, drugs that, according to the federal government, have no accepted medical use. I'm sorry to hear the news about that. Was there more you wanted to share?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Thanks for the call, dude. I appreciate it. That's an interesting point that Joe Biden has gone back on his drug reformer ways and is now going for mandatory minimums and crackdowns on this stuff. It's the insanity of the war on drugs just continuing again. They've got the new target. In the 80s, it was crack. In the 90s, it was meth or whatever, the aughts. And now it's fentanyl.
Well, he probably needs support from law enforcement and the
and this
prison
means
industrial.
Big money for them.
Yep, prison industrial complex.
That's true. Any drug prohibition just means more prisoners flowing into the prisons so they can be used for slave labor.
Yep.
And so on.
Literal slave labor. People think that the United States has got to abolish slave labor, but that's actually not true. They did not abolish slave labor. There is an exception for prisoners.
So yeah, this insane war on drugs continues on. I mean, you would think that we would be getting closer to this thing ending, but it seems like while there may be a pullback in the area of marijuana, we have seen more than 20 states, I believe now, have legal recreational cannabis. So, I mean, that should be applauded. I'm glad to hear that. I'm not glad that the government is in control of it now, that it's a government-regulated, government-taxed, government-controlled situation. That's not good news. But it's still better that there aren't as many people going to prison for it. And, that's, I think overall, it's been a better move than prohibition. But you would think that, ending the war on marijuana might lead to some more openness towards ending the war on all drugs. And it doesn't seem like that's the case. People are just as insane about going after fentanyl now as they've been at every other, point in drug war history against some other drug.
Yeah, what's unfortunate too is that we see this again and again and again. Where is if you have a large population, whatever it is that's prohibited, you legalize, you get them supporting, the legalization of X, of which a certain percentage of that population ends up, whatever the thing that's in most demand, and then that's it. It's like, but all those other people who supported the legalization, they don't have any positive impact as a result because it just stops because the majority have been
got what they wanted.
They got what they wanted. Yeah.
Out of time for tonight. Check out Chris on his show. He does his own show. It's called Freedom Decrypted. Go to freedomdecrypted.com and you can tune into that online anytime. Podcast, video excerpts, video archives, and of course live on Saturdays. We'll see you tomorrow.
Talk for prickly people.
Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. In addition to being one of the world's first cryptocurrencies, Dash was the first crypto project to have a decentralized autonomous organization that to this day continues to improve and promote Dash. Every month, 10% of the mining rewards go into a treasury. Anyone with one Dash to spend can put forward a proposal to the Dash masternodes to vote on. The masternodes vet the proposals and decide which ones move forward and are funded by the Treasury. In fact, that's exactly how we got this sponsorship. Nowadays, DAOs are plentiful, but Dash paved the way by doing it first, nearly a decade ago. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get and use Dash. Start by learning more at dash.org. Thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. Visit dash.org to learn about Dash.